generations roar. Hearts united, we're ready for more. Through every challenge, we'll light the flame. The world will remember our name.
A decade has passed since Ash Ketchum embarked on his Pokemon journey. In the wake of increased incidents involving the safety of young trainers, significant changes have been implemented in the laws governing Pokemon training. Aspiring individuals must now be at least 15 years old to obtain a trainer's license. This adjustment reflects a response to a rising number of fatalities and disappearances among trainers under the age of 13. Prompting authorities to raise the age requirement in a bid to enhance the overall safety of Pokemon journeys. 3 years ago, a colossal Pokemon war erupted, with the sinister aim of world domination. Evil organizations from every corner of the globe united under the command of Giovani, creating a formidable force that clashed with the world's most skilled trainers. The conflict resulted in tragic casualties, affecting characters whose stories will unfold as we progress. Ash Ketchum emerged as the heroic leader of the forces fighting for good, securing victory and disbanding the united organizations. Those who survived were either imprisoned or met their fate on the battlefield. Ash Ketchum, now revered as the world's greatest trainer and true master, has become a beacon of inspiration, especially for young aspiring trainers like Marc Masters. Hailing from New Barktown in Johto, the 15-year-old Marc is just a week away from receiving his first Pokemon. However, his thoughts are currently consumed by the approaching Pokemon World Championships, a momentous event that captures his attention and sets the stage for the next chapter in his journey. Marc woke up to the blaring sound of his Pidgey alarm clock, only to realize with dismay that he had overslept. The finals were already in full swing. In a hurry, he made his way down the spacious halls of his home, where he found his mother, Mia Masters, caring for his baby brother, MJ, with a bottle in hand. However, Marc was too engrossed in the ongoing TV broadcast to notice his surroundings. The finals showcased a high-stakes battle between Ash Ketchum, the reigning world champion, and Misty, the formidable Water Master and Kanto region's champion. With both trainers down to their last 2 Pokemon each, Misty sent out her dominating legendary Pokemon, Kyogre, while Ash called upon his iconic Pikachu, a legendary figure in its own right. The clash between Kyogre's Origin Pulse and Pikachu's Volt Tackle resulted in a spectacular explosion, leaving both Pokemon unable to continue. As Misty sent out her final Pokemon, Blastoise, and Ash released his Charizard, Marc couldn't contain his excitement at the sight of the fire lizard soaring through the stadium. The intensity of the battle reminded him of Ash's iconic clash against Gary Oak a decade ago, when Marc was just a 5-year-old fan. The battle raged on, with flamethrowers and hydro pumps exchanged, causing both Pokemon to endure significant damage. In the midst of the chaos, Marc noticed a glimmering light around one of the Blastoise's claws. To his surprise, Misty's Blastoise underwent a Mega Evolution. Ash, undeterred, reached into his pocket, retrieving a band and attaching it to his wrist. Tossing a stone-like object to Charizard, it too underwent Mega Evolution, transforming into Mega Charizard Y. With Misty calling for a Hydro Cannon and Ash commanding Dragon Pulse, the collision created another explosive spectacle, obscuring the stadium in smoke. Blastoise used Rapid Spin to clear the air, but Charizard had disappeared. A sudden crash announced Charizard's emergence from beneath the ground, executing a surprising dig attack. The real shock came when Charizard's right talon sparked with electrical energy, delivering a powerful Thunder Punch to Blastoise's face. With this unexpected move, Ash Ketchum secured his victory, retaining his title as the Pokemon champion of the world. As the battle reached its climax, Marc, caught up in the excitement, exclaimed his aspiration to become a Pokemon master just like Ash, conquering gyms, leagues, and regional champions with a Charizard by his side. However, his mother Mia interrupted, reminding him that next week he would be receiving a Cyndaquil from Professor Elm, not a Charmander. The door burst open, revealing 2 boys of the same age as Marc, Energetic Marc Masters and know-it-all Malcolm, his triplet brothers, entered the room. The three were unmistakably triplets, yet starkly contrasted each other. Marc, the youngest, often found himself trailing behind his brothers. Maven embodied brawn, while Malcolm possessed brains, leaving Marc somewhere in between. Maven and Malcolm expressed frustration with Marc for not waking them up for the finals. Marc proceeded to explain the outcome, with Malcolm anticipating Ash's victory and Maven disheartened over Misty's loss, fueled by his hope to marry her one day. Marc then unveiled his desire to choose Charmander as his starter Pokemon. To gain their support, he convinced his brothers that they should also select the other Kanto starters. Maven, who harbored feelings for Misty, envisioned using Squirtle to woo her, while Malcolm, with a fondness for grass and bug types, saw the opportunity to catch a Chikorita upon choosing Bulbasaur. Mia, their mother, sighed and advised the boys to discuss their choices with their father. Marc Masters, a world-renowned Pokemon breeder, researcher, and new Barktown gym leader, possessed remarkable skills in Pokemon battles. His prowess was such that he was offered a position with the Johto region's Elite Four, while he declined to remain close to his family and manage his enclosed landscape for Pokemon studies and breeding. The triplets hurried out of their house, weaving through the streets of New Barktown until they reached the imposing structure of the New Barktown Gym, which overlooked the enclosed landscape. Upon entering, they found a training battle in progress. Mike, their father and gym leader, showcased his formidable Typhlosion, engaged in a bout against an Onix wielded by Grandpa Masters. Despite the type disadvantage, Typhlosion effortlessly defeated Grandpa's Onix. The boys announced their presence, prompting Maven and Malcolm to push Marc forward. The pressure was on for him to reveal their intentions to their father. However, before Marc could utter a word, Mike gathered his sons, wrapping his arms around them in a show of support. He delivered a heartfelt pep talk about their upcoming journey, expressing his pride in their pursuits. Grandpa Masters joined in, expressing happiness for Malcolm's upcoming Chikorita, a choice that brought joy as he still grieved the loss of his own Meganium. Marc finally mustered the courage to blurt out his desire for Charmander as his starter Pokemon, with his brothers admitting they too wish for the other Kanto starters. Grandpa Masters was furious, staunchly defending Johto as the superior region. Mike fell silent, briefly glancing back at his Typhlosion. Despite his initial excitement for Marc to receive a Cyndaquil, Mike wanted his sons to pursue their dreams. Determined to support them, he decided to call his friend Gary Oak, the main professor in the Kanto region, to arrange for his sons to receive the Kanto starters. This meant the triplets would be embarking on a journey to Kanto. Mike instructed them to go to Professor Elm's lab and inform him that they would not be receiving the Johto starters next week. Although the boys felt a sense of dread, recognizing Professor Elm's occasional unhinged demeanor, they agreed to face the responsibility. Arriving at Professor Elm's laboratory, situated just around the corner from the gym, they entered the large wooden building. Inside, scientists in white coats scurried around various machines. Jackson Elm, the professor's son and apprentice, was busy overseeing an electronic pedestal holding over a dozen Pokemon eggs. It took 5 attempts for Jackson to notice the boys, who hesitantly revealed that they would not be receiving Johto starters, but would instead be heading to Pallet Town to obtain the Kanto starters from Professor Oak. Elm scrutinized the anxious boys for several minutes before revealing that he anticipated this turn of events, especially in Marc's case. He recounted a memory of the 5-year-old Marc joining his father Mike and Professor Elm on a visit to the Terrific Valley. Elm vividly recalled the fire in Marc's eyes upon witnessing a Charizard for the first time. With the recollection in mind, Professor Elm gave his approval for the boys to choose the Kanto starters. While Maven and Malcolm were overjoyed to escape the scolding, Marc still harbored guilt and offered his assistance to the lab. Jackson Elm seized the opportunity and presented an assignment requiring an extra pair of hands, involving a rare Pokemon. Before Malcolm and Maven could devise an excuse, Jackson disclosed that the assignment revolved around a 7-foot-tall, shiny Skarmory in Cherry Grove City. He warned them to follow his instructions, emphasizing the potential danger as Skarmory were known predators. Maven and Malcolm, filled with excitement, eagerly embraced the idea. However, reality struck Marc like a bolt of lightning. His heart raced through the car trip. palms sweating, as the anticipation of the encounter with the formidable Skarmory brought a mixture of fear and uncertainty. They arrived at Mr. Pokemon's cottage, where the elderly man greeted them while sitting on a Rotom scooter hovering above the ground. Jackson introduced the boys as Marc Masters' sons, mentioning that they would start their journey the following week. Mr. Pokemon offered some advice about the dangers of the journey, causing Mark's heart to race and his mouth to go dry. They followed Mr. Pokemon to his garden, where trees filled with shaking Ipom seeking refuge from the giant Skarmory, which was munching on bowls of Pokemon food on the grass. Mr. Pokemon explained that various Pokemon usually visited his garden for rest and food, but the presence of Skarmory had scared them away. Jackson instructed the boys to stay put while he cautiously approached the Skarmory with his briefcase. Maven, eager for a closer look, was restrained by his brothers, leading to a brief argument. The commotion caught Skarmory's attention, causing it to turn and spot Jackson stealthily trailing behind. Skarmory retaliated with Metal Sound, causing Jackson to drop his briefcase and fall to his knees, groaning in pain. Mr. Pokemon quickly hovered in front of Jackson just as Skarmory approached, its wings glowing silver. A green electric ball generated from Mr. Pokemon's Rotom scooter, creating a shield. The collision between Skarmory's steel wing and the electric shield caused Skarmory to flinch back. Jackson's urgent scream pierced the air as he directed the boys to seek refuge in the cottage. However, fear held them in place as Skarmory closed in. In a swift move, Jackson released a Pokeball, summoning a Sunflora that employed Safeguard to shield the boys. Skarmory, undeterred, soared high and unleashed another Metal Sound, causing Sunflora's Safeguard to dissipate. With a precise aerial ace, Skarmory struck Sunflora directly. As the metallic Pokemon loomed over the trembling boys, it executed Swift, prompting the brothers to scatter. Skarmory targeted Mark, opening its jaws to emit a bright beaming light. A silver beam shot out, and in terror, Mark curled into a ball, shutting his eyes and screaming for his life. There was a resounding crash, followed by cheers, as an Electabuzz stood guard over Mark, using Protect with unwavering eyes fixed on Skarmory. A determined young woman, Sergeant Sarah, appeared behind Mark, commanding Electabuzz to unleash a thunderbolt on Skarmory, rendering it paralyzed and unable to move. Maven and Malcolm applauded the girl and her Electabuzz. Mr. Pokemon revealed Sarah to be his great-niece and the Vermilion City gym leader, inheriting the role from her late father, Lieutenant Surge. Maven mistakenly mentioned Lieutenant Surge's association with Team Rocket, but Malcolm corrected him, explaining that he was a double agent who died supporting Ash Ketchum's army in the Pokemon War. Sarah, uninterested in dwelling on her father's past, questioned why she had to save the boys from a rogue shiny Skarmory. Jackson explained they had come to study Skarmory, but Sarah dismissed the idea, suggesting not all Pokemon wanted to be studied. Sarah proposed releasing Skarmory into the wild and providing it with a Paralyze heal, but Jackson insisted on taking it back to the lab. This led to a heated argument between Jackson and Sarah over what to do with Skarmory. Mark found the courage to express his frustration, asserting that Pokemon shouldn't be forced into labs. His passion for Skarmory, a Pokemon that had nearly taken his life, impressed both Sarah and Mr. Pokemon. Jackson eventually agreed, suggesting they catch Skarmory in a Pokeball and release it into the wild. However, when Jackson threw a heal ball instead, Skarmory broke free, no longer paralyzed. In a swift move, Skarmory seized Mark and ascended into the clouds, carrying him across the skies of Cherry Grove for 10 tense minutes. As they soared over New Barktown, Mark spotted his father's gym and the enclosed landscape where Pokemon lived peacefully. Panicking, Mark screamed for help, and the Pokemon below recognized him, rushing in a panic. A flock of Hoot Hoot tried to aid Mark, attacking Skarmory, but their efforts were futile. Skarmory responded with Aerial Ace, causing Mark to vomit as his vision blurred. Distressed, Mike, Mia, and Grandpa ran through the field, throwing Pokeballs to release their Pokemon for help. Noctowl and Jigglypuff, summoned by Mike and Mia, pursued Skarmory. Jigglypuff's soothing song put Skarmory to sleep, causing it to release Mark, who was caught by Onyx's tail as he fell. Skarmory crashed into the lake, where Poliwrath and Politoed saved it from drowning. Barely opening its eyes, Skarmory gazed at Marc with disappointment. Marc broke away from his mother's arms, sprinting through the fields, past the gym, and into New Barktown. He returned home and locked himself in his bedroom, ignoring his family's knocks for hours. Underneath his blankets, he cried until exhaustion overtook him, and he fell asleep. The Pidgey alarm clock roused him from his slumber, and he approached a poster on his wall featuring a young Ash holding a trophy with Pikachu on his shoulder, commemorating his victory as the Alolan champion. Another knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Frustrated, he shouted for them to go away. To his surprise, it was Sergeant Sarah, asking to speak with him. Against his initial resistance, Marc let her in. She reassured him that there was no shame in being scared about what happened, emphasizing that when he received his Charmander, his partner, he would always feel safe. Marc, however, snapped, expressing his unwillingness to become a Pokemon trainer, deeming himself weak and undeserving of any Pokemon. Sarah, in response to Marc's declaration, said, "Well, Marc, that is your choice, one you will regret. So tell me, how are you going to feel when Maven wins the Silver Conference or when Malcolm wins the Battle Frontier? You have a 2-year-old brother. How will you feel when MJ grows up and becomes the Pokemon Master Champion of the world like your hero, Ash Ketchum?" Marc fell silent, contemplating her words. As Sarah turned to leave, Marc stopped her, inquiring about Skarmory. Sarah, visibly surprised, informed him that Skarmory had been recovered and released at Mount Silver. She then pulled a pair of dark red gloves from her dress pocket, revealing them to be her father's first trainer gloves, keeping them as a memento after his death. She found strength in them, and now wanted to pass them on to Marc in the hope of giving him strength. Touched by the gesture, Marc reluctantly accepted the gloves. He shook her hand with tearful eyes, and filled with newfound determination, he marched downstairs to meet his worried family in the living room. Breaking the heavy silence, he declared, "I'm going to be the very best, like no one ever was." A storm unleashed its fury over Viridian City, where hundreds gathered to protest around the Viridian City gym. News of the gym's reopening had stirred up controversy, as Giovani once led it. Now his estranged son Silver was set to take charge, leading to resentment among locals who feared that Silver might follow in his father's footsteps. Observing the protest, Professor Samuel Oakes' granddaughter, Daisy Oak Stone, stood alongside her daughter, Rachel Stone. The child's father, former Hoenn region champion Steven Stone, shared her sentiments, both expressing their disgust at Silver's decision to reopen the gym. Despite Rachel's frustration, Daisy urged her to leave and continue shopping, concerned that the stormy weather could lead to her catching a cold just days before embarking on her Pokemon coordinator journey. While Rachel hesitated, Daisy found herself engaged in conversation with an Officer Jenny she knew from high school. The two chatted, leaving Rachel to gaze at the ongoing protest with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Outside the Viridian City gym gate, a mysterious figure, clad in black, with a hood covering his face, stood amidst the crowd. Jenny's Growlithe bolted through the people, and the hooded man attempted to scale the gates, earning cheers from some civilians. Growlithe, however, sprang up and clamped its fangs onto the man's shoe, yanking him back down. Officer Jenny swiftly made her way through the crowd, seized the man, and pulled his hood back, revealing a teenage boy not much older than Rachel. The boy, named Anthony Green, a 17-year-old from Viridian City, angrily declared his intention to confront Silver and make him regret coming to the city. Jenny recognized Anthony and knew his mother, Hillary Green, a cleaner at the Pokemon Center, well respected in her community for her hard work as a single mother facing financial struggles. As Anthony vented his frustrations, Daisy and Rachel, intrigued by the unfolding drama, failed to notice a Mankey sneaking up behind them. The mischievous Pokemon snatched Daisy's purse and tossed it into the air. A man wearing a ghastly mask swiftly caught it, and the duo escaped into a dark alleyway. Witnessing the robbery, Jenny released Anthony and, accompanied by her Growlithe, sped off on her motorcycle to apprehend the thieves. However, upon reaching the dead end of the alleyway, the robber and his Mankey vanished. Anthony approached Rachel and Daisy, asserting his familiarity with the streets and a hunch about where the robbers might have gone. He grabbed a bicycle and sped off down the road, leaving Rachel to call after him. Her boots flashed with yellow lights, and suddenly wheels popped out from beneath the shoe. These were Rotom skates, and Rachel rocketed through the crowd with her mother crying after her. Out of sight, she quickly caught up to Anthony. Despite Anthony yelling at her for following him, Rachel demanded that he tell her what he knew about the robber. Anthony explained that many robbers use Hypno, which lurk in alleyways waiting to escape through teleportation. Moreover, they often have a designated safe place to which they teleport. The pair arrived at an old abandoned playground and discovered the robber and the Mankey behind a tree, emptying Daisy's purse containing cash, jewelry, and Pokeballs. Rachel, with great courage, yelled at the robber, who simply laughed. When he turned to acknowledge Anthony as a former thief, Anthony claimed that life was behind him. However, Rachel interrupted, demanding her mother's belongings back, especially her Pokemon. The robber mocked her, prompting Rachel to throw a Pokeball, and Eevee emerged growling at the Mankey. The robber retaliated by throwing a Pokeball, summoning a Grimer to stand alongside the Mankey. Rachel recoiled in disgust. As a clean freak, she hated poison-type Pokemon.
Dirty poison
Anthony
type.
suggested she send out a second Pokemon for an even playing field, but Rachel had only received her first Pokemon, Eevee, a couple days ago. She asked Anthony to send out a Pokemon, but he revealed he was not a trainer and had no Pokemon. Rachel made a shocked remark, to which Anthony responded, "We all don't have parents who can afford to get their kids a trainer's license." While they argued, the robber commanded Mankey to use Double Kick and Grimer to use Acid. Rachel, determined to fight back, ordered Eevee to use Sand Attack. The gust of sand sprayed into Mankey's eyes, but the acid hit Eevee, sending it reeling. Struck by poison, Eevee staggered but pushed through, dragging itself forward. It charged for a quick attack, tackling into Grimer's sludge body, causing minimal damage. Unfortunately, this increased the poison, and Eevee vomited and collapsed. Rachel cried out, but Eevee, showing incredible resilience, dragged itself up to barely stand. Anthony, concerned for Eevee's well-being, ordered Rachel to send it back into its Pokeball, citing its low level and the risk for further harm. "But he has my mom's Pokemon. I don't care about her money or jewelry. I grew up with those creatures. They're family." Anthony stared at Rachel for a moment and shook his head out of the trance. He said he had a plan. He asked Rachel to use Eevee to distract Grimer and Mankey. Rachel ordered Eevee to use Attract. Both Grimer and Mankey went googly-eyed and refused to harm Eevee any further, infuriating the robber. This distraction caught the robber off guard as he realized Anthony was nowhere in sight. He looked around in a sweat until a shadow fell from the tree above him. Anthony drove his knees into the robber's back and dragged him to the ground. He crawled to the purse where all of Daisy's belongings lay and picked up one of the Pokeballs in its miniature form, pressing the center button for it to expand. Eevee vomited again and fainted by Rachel's feet. She picked it up in her arms and started sobbing. Mankey ran towards Anthony and kicked him in the chest, sending him through the air. Anthony rose to his feet, gasping for breath. "That's all. I picked a strong one," Anthony said, staring at the Ultra Ball in his hand. He tossed it through the air and it released the Pokemon in a bright light. "Holy crap! It's a Dragonite!" Dragonite belting an echoing roar caused Mankey and Grimer to cower back to the robber. Anthony then explained to the confused Dragonite what's happening. The robber threw 4 more Pokeballs with Rage. A Hypno, Magnemite, Pinsir, and Raticate joined Mankey and Grimer in battle, but Dragonite was not one bit intimidated. Anthony glanced back at Rachel, unsure what to do. Meanwhile, the robber's 6 Pokemon were conjuring up attacks. Rachel tossed her Rotom phone to Anthony, explaining it is also a Pokédex, and it can inform him of Dragonite's moveset. A nervous Anthony called for Dragonite to use Extreme Speed to avoid the incoming attacks and to follow it up with Dragon Tail. Like a flash, Dragonite pursued the 6 Pokemon with its tail turning a glowing green while hardening into a thick scale layer. He bashed all 6, and they were sent flying into the robber, and they crashed into the tree. Anthony called for Thunderbolt, to which Rachel protested against as she felt this might end fatally. Dragonite's antennas began to spark, and then a bolt of lightning shot out of its head and zoomed up into the gray clouds. A thick beam of lightning belted down and struck the robber and his 6 Pokemon, all howling in pain. The beam vanished, and Rachel dashed to check if the robber and the Pokemon were alive. And she was relieved they were, but they were badly injured. Rachel snatched her phone from a stunned Anthony, who was frozen in bewilderment. She called Officer Jenny and an ambulance. Rachel thanked Anthony for his help, but explained the Thunderbolt wasn't necessary as Dragonite is an extremely high-leveled Pokemon who had been trained for 2 decades. Words failed to exit Anthony's mouth as he became overwhelmed. Sirens wailed through the park, the flashing lights of police squad bikes and ambulances cutting through the dusk. Medics swiftly attend to Evie, administering an antidote to counteract the effects of the poison. Relief washed over Rachel as she recounted the battle to Jenny, who commended Anthony for his quick thinking. Returning to the street of the Viridian City gym, the protest clamor persisted. Daisy, stress evident in her tear-streaked face, ran towards Rachel, embracing her tightly. Another woman, Hillary, followed closely. Her own distress transformed into anger as she smacked Anthony behind the ear. As Hillary scolded her son, Daisy whispered to Rachel, questioning why a 17-year-old like Anthony hadn't become a trainer earlier. Rachel explained the financial struggles, and Daisy nodded in understanding. Approaching Anthony, Daisy thanked them for protecting her daughter and Pokemon. "If you could be a trainer," Daisy asked, "what kind would you be?" Anthony's eyes gleamed with determination. "If I were a trainer, my first goal would be to support my mom financially. I want to buy her a house so she can live a comfortable life without worry. Then, I'll work on becoming a Pokemon master." In a gesture that mirrored the depth of her conviction, Daisy continued, her gaze fixed on Anthony. Recognizing his potential and commending his selfless courage, she vowed to secure Gary Oak's endorsement for Anthony as a Pokemon trainer. The promise of a Pokemon license seemed to hang in the air like a shimmering possibility, and the shock on Anthony's and his mother's faces reflected the magnitude of Daisy's offer. With a sense of urgency, Daisy proposed that Anthony join her and Rachel on their return journey to Pallet Town. There, he would have the chance to meet the renowned Gary Oak himself. In the heart of Pallet Town, a new chapter awaited Anthony, marked by the reception of a Pokédex and the selection of a starter Pokemon, a destiny unfolding before him. Yet as the trio absorbed the weight of this revelation, a tumultuous roar erupted from the protesters. Boos and jeers shadowed the moment, drawing attention to the gate of the gym where police officers struggled to disperse the angered crowd. The gate slowly creaked open, revealing a path cleared by the authoritative presence of law enforcement. Amidst the chaos, a sleek black limousine glided through the gate, coming to a regal halt outside the gym doors. The driver, dressed in a sharp black suit, stepped out and made his way to the rear of the limousine. With practiced precision, he swung open the back door, unveiling a young man no older than 25 who emerged with an air of undeniable confidence. This was Silver, the son of the infamous Giovani. Unfazed by the hostile reception, he waved at the protesters as though their vehement words were a symphony of gratitude. The ironic gesture only served to further enrage the crowd, their anger reaching new heights as the limousine's presence loomed, a symbol of authority and power in the tumultuous sea of dissent.
To the great people of Viridian City, and my fellow Cantonians, I assure you, I am not like Giovani. I have preoccupied this gym to restore its greatness. I will not be using it as a secret base, like that evil man did. I am as glad as you are he is locked away in a deserted island along with the rest of the Dark Alliance. I promise to be a gym leader you can be proud of. Here, I make a vow. If I lose a battle, I will step down as gym leader. However, I will only accept elite challenges. Any who choose to challenge this gym must have 7 gym badges or equivalent accomplishments on their record.
Silver gave the crowd another arrogant wave before he and his entourage entered the gym, and the protesters continued to chant their hatred with many trainers stepping forward, demanding a battle. "I have another goal," Anthony said, smiling at his mother Hillary, Daisy, and Rachel. "I'm gonna knock that punk off his throne." The SS Anne sailed smoothly into Vermilion City Harbor, its white hull gleaming under the sunlight. Marc leaned against the railing, captivated by the sight of water Pokemon playfully diving in and out of the ocean waves. His brothers, equally enthralled, stood behind him, their excitement bubbling over as they anticipated receiving their starter Pokemon. As the ship docked, Mike and Sergeant Sarah approached them, alerting them that it was time to disembark. The Masters, exchanging smiles with Sarah, bid farewell at the docks. Sarah, making her way back to the Vermilion City gym, turned to the triplets with an encouraging smile.
Challenge my gym after you get your starter Pokemon,
She suggested. Eager to share their plans, Malcolm cut Marc off. We're heading back to Johto to challenge the gyms there. Sarah wished them luck, and Marc took a moment to express his gratitude. Thank you again for these gloves, he said, holding up the pair that once belonged to her father, Lieutenant Surge. I promise to return them to you someday. With a nod of appreciation, Marc and his brothers stepped onto the Vermilion docks, ready to embark on the next chapter of their Pokemon journey. A Jeep honked, and Mike revealed it was their ride to Pallet Town. The doors swung open, and to Marc's astonishment, none other than Professor Gary Oak stepped out. Marc's jaw fell in disbelief, starstruck at the opportunity to meet a childhood friend and rival of Ash Ketchum. Mike, ever enthusiastic, introduced his boys to Gary, who beamed at the triplets. Thrilled to finally meet you all, he said, honored that they chose him to receive their starter Pokemon from. As the journey to Pallet Town began, Marc remained very shy, barely speaking. His brothers, however, couldn't contain their excitement and bombarded Gary with questions. Malcolm wanted to know all about the grass and bug types Gary had researched, while Maven was eager to hear about Gary's past meetings with Misty, the Kanto champion. The landscape changed as they left Vermilion City, the Jeep cruising along the winding roads. Marc stole glances at Gary, while the rhythmic hum of the engine and the chatter of the brothers filled the air. In the quiet moments between questions, Marc found himself lost in his thoughts, contemplating the journey that lay ahead. They pulled into Pallet Town and Oak Laboratory, the contrast striking when compared to Elm Laboratory. The atmosphere at Oak Lab was serene and tranquil, a departure from the hustle and bustle of their previous encounter. As they stepped inside, a calmness enveloped the living room where retired Professor Samuel Oak sat, sipping tea, and engrossed in the art of writing poetry. Warm smiles greeted them, and Professor Oak expressed his delight at seeing Marc Masters again, eager to hear about his latest research. Marc, once more overwhelmed by the presence of the same professor who had given Ash Ketchum his first Pokemon, Pichu, found himself at a loss for words. In contrast, his brothers were brimming with questions for the seasoned professor, filling the room with their enthusiastic curiosity. In walked one of Gary's assistants, accompanied by a 15-year-old boy whose sour stares seemed directed straight at the triplets. The assistant reassured the boy that it wouldn't be much longer before his Pokemon was ready, emphasizing the need for patience. Gary Oak introduced the boy as Victor, a budding Pokemon trainer with a passion for archaeology. Attempting to ease the tension, Marc extended an invitation for Victor to hang out with them while he waited for his Pokemon. However, Victor, with a snarl, remained silent. It wasn't until he noticed Mike that his demeanor changed. Suddenly, he was honored to meet the well-established researcher. The atmosphere grew tense as Victor directed a cutting remark at the triplets.
I am amazed at the genius spark that lives in Marc Masters. I don't see it in you three.
Malcolm had to hold Maven back from punching Victor, and Marc decided to ignore him. They ascended the stairs, following Gary to the main lab, where a machine held 3 Pokeballs. With a swift toss, Gary unleashed the first one, revealing a playful Squirtle. Maven's joy knew no bounds as he scooped up the Squirtle, dancing exuberantly around the room. Victor, however, couldn't resist muttering,
That Squirtle has no class.
The second Pokeball released a Bulbasaur. Malcolm, blushing but composed, crouched down to the smiling Bulbasaur and extended his hand. A vine slithered out of Bulbasaur's bulb, forming a symbiotic handshake with Malcolm. Victor sneered, remarking,
That Bulbasaur has its head in the clouds.
Marc's heart raced as Gary approached the final Pokeball. With a powerful toss, it exploded open, revealing a Charmander that tumbled over Marc. Catching it in his arms, Marc and Charmander locked eyes for a profound moment. "You're beautiful." Marc couldn't help but express his admiration. In response, Charmander sneezed, releasing black smog that enveloped Marc's face.
That Charmander looks like a sissy. Perfect match, I guess.
Victor's derogatory comment lingered in the air. Rachel Stone entered the lab at that moment, her Eevee perched comfortably on her shoulder. She retorted,
Just because the Charmander is female doesn't mean she's a sissy, stupid boy.
Gary introduced the group to his niece, Rachel, unveiling her aspirations as a Pokemon coordinator. Maven's face lit up at the sight of Rachel, and interestingly enough, so did Squirtle's upon spotting Eevee. Marc, curious, inquired how Rachel knew that his Charmander was female at first glance. Rachel, with a smirk, replied that being an oak had its perks. The lab's tranquility shattered as Anthony Green barged in, amok, hot on his heels. Rachel, who harbored a dislike for poison types, let out a scream and stumbled backward, colliding with Malcolm. In the chaos, Bulbasaur fell into Rachel's lap, provoking another scream. Marc, wide-eyed, asked if the muck belonged to Ash Ketchum, a query Gary confirmed. Overjoyed, Marc leaped into Muck's squishy body, thrilled to meet a Pokemon associated with his hero. Once Rachel had calmed down, she introduced Anthony as her new friend, mentioning that he too was on the brink of receiving his first Pokemon. Victor couldn't resist making more remarks, this time questioning Anthony's age. Rachel swiftly shut him down, instructing Victor to mind his own business. In response, Victor shifted his gaze to Rachel, realizing that she was Rachel Stone, daughter of Stephen Stone, his own hero. He spoke of Stephen in the past tense, expressing his sorrow upon learning of Stephen's passing after the Pokemon War. Anthony, unaware of this revelation, turned to Rachel with a somber expression, grappling with the unexpected news. As the air settled, Professor Samuel Oak gracefully changed the subject, reciting a poem that wove through the air, bringing a sense of calmness. Meanwhile, Gary Oak approached Anthony, a Pokeball in hand. Grateful for Anthony's courageous act in saving his niece and his sister's Pokemon, Gary acknowledged that, unfortunately, he was out of Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle. However, based on Daisy's glowing recommendation of Anthony, he believed he had selected the perfect partner for him. With a simple toss, Anthony released a young Dratini from the Pokeball. This sight triggered an instant flashback to Daisy's Dragonite, which he had battled against the robber the day before. Gary revealed that this Dratini was, in fact, the offspring of Daisy's Dragonite, expressing his belief that Anthony would become a great Dragonite trainer. The two professors then handed out Rotom phones with installed Pokedexes to Marc, Maven, Malcolm, Victor, and Anthony. Maven, struck by infatuation, couldn't resist questioning Rachel's possession of a Rotom phone, to which she confirmed. Intrigued by the evolution stones she wore on her necklace, Maven asked about their significance. Rachel shared her love for Pokemon that evolve via evolutionary stones and her goal of forming a team around these special evolutions. In response, Maven, ever the enthusiast for water types, complimented Rachel, comparing her eyes to the beauty of a water stone. Mike had to intervene, tactfully moving him away before he could say too much. Gary's assistant re-entered the lab, holding a Pokeball that he handed to Victor, who finally revealed a genuine smile. Attempting to make a swift exit, Victor found himself questioned by Marc. Marc, finding newfound courage, asked why Victor wasn't eager to reveal his partner to the room, especially considering he had plenty to say about everyone else's choices. Gary's suggestion to have the new trainers engage in their first official battles received unanimous agreement, and Mike endorsed the idea. Marc eagerly stepped forward, challenging Victor with Charmander by his side. Victor, brimming with confidence, laughed off Marc's challenge, asserting that his name destined him for victories. Maven, seeking to impress Rachel, accepted Anthony's challenge, leaving Rachel to face Malcolm. Rachel, despite her aversion to battling poison types, agreed to Gary's suggestion, recognizing the importance of overcoming her fear. The group made their way to Oak's expansive landscape, reminiscent of Mike's property in New Barktown. Pokemon roamed freely and Charmander tugged at Marc's shirt, urging him to focus on the impending battle. The first match unfolding with Eevee facing off against Bulbasaur. Rachel directed Eevee to use Quick Attack, catching Bulbasaur off guard. Bulbasaur responded with a growl, momentarily disrupting Eevee's momentum. Vine shot out from Bulbasaur's bulb, smacking Eevee in the face. Bulbasaur lunged for a tackle, but Eevee skillfully evaded with a sand attack. Rachel seized the opportunity, commanding Eevee to use Attract. Bulbasaur's demeanor mirrored Maven's adoration for Rachel as Eevee unleashed a barrage of quick attacks, securing victory. The triumphant sound of cash alerts on Rachel's Rotom phone, and Gary explained the monetary reward for the winner, eliciting excitement from Anthony. Malcolm, disappointed in his loss, couldn't help but feel a twinge of anger toward Maven, who seemed more jubilant for Rachel's success than his own. The following battle featured Dratini against Squirtle. Maven swiftly commanded Squirtle to use Water Gun, catching Dratini off guard with a swift blast. Rachel quickly instructed Anthony to check Dratini's moves in the Pokédex. Anthony then directed Dratini to use Leer, causing Squirtle to pause momentarily. Dratini slithered around Squirtle and ensnared it with Wrap, but Squirtle countered with Withdrawal, its shell proving too resilient to be constricted. The two Pokemon exchanged attacks simultaneously, and both were left unable to battle, resulting in a tied match. A tense atmosphere hung over the battlefield as a nervous Mark stepped forward for his match. Glancing at his Charmander, who seemed equally anxious, he braced himself. Victor, his opponent, confidently tossed his Pokeball, summoning a surprising choice, Kabuto, a revived fossil Pokemon. The group was taken aback by Victor's unique starter, and he proudly explained that he had won an archaeology competition, earning the privilege of receiving a fossil Pokemon from Gary Oak. Victor made it clear that he had earned his Pokemon through hard work, not as a spoiled brat or charity case like some trainers. Realizing the type advantage Kabuto had over Charmander, Mark spoke reassuringly to his partner. "Charlie, I know Kabuto has a type advantage over you, but if what I study on them is correct, they don't learn rock or water type moves at this early level." Victor mocked Mark for nicknaming his Charmander. He then ordered Kabuto to use Scratch. Kabuto, incredibly fast, lunged at Charlie, who, thinking quickly, used Scratch to counter. Both Pokemon flinched back from the exchange. Charlie, following Mark's guidance, continued to scratch Kabuto, but the fossil Pokemon employed Harden, minimizing the damage. Fatigue set in for Charlie, and Kabuto seized the opportunity to use Absorb, draining more energy. In an attempt to turn the tide, Charlie used Growl to make Kabuto stagger and followed up with Ember. Although the fire attack didn't inflict significant damage, Charlie persisted in spitting fire. Kabuto, displaying unexpected agility, launched itself high into the air, using another Absorb while airborne and following it up with Scratch as it descended. Overwhelmed, Charlie was unable to continue the battle. Victor gave Mark an arrogant smirk as he recalled Kabuto to its Pokeball and, without acknowledging the group, exited Oak Laboratory. Mark rushed to Charlie's side, cradling her in his arms. Rachel and Anthony stood over him, offering words of praise for his skill in battle. Mike observed the scene with a smile, saying to Maven and Malcolm, "Looks like Mark made some friends." The unexpected arrival of Delia Ketchum, Ash's mother, brought a wave of surprise to the group. She warmly welcomed the new trainers, offering them freshly baked muffins and wishing them good luck. Excitement bubbled within Mark, and he couldn't resist asking if she could introduce him to his hero, Ash, one day. Delia, with a laugh, suggested there was no time like the present. The group was thrilled, and Delia invited them over to her house for lunch to meet Ash, who had returned home for a brief visit. Mark, overjoyed, had always dreamt of meeting Ash as an experienced trainer, never imagining it would happen on his first day. Before they could head to Delia's house, Samuel Oak provided Oran berries for the Pokemon, and the group began walking through the field. However, their plans took a drastic turn when a massive explosion rocked Pallet Town, and they witnessed a tower of smoke rising in the distance. Delia identified it as her house and rushed towards the blaze. The group followed, and upon reaching the scene, they found Delia's house burning. Mr. Mime unconscious across the street, and Rachel ran to its aid. Gary Oak and Mike quickly attended to the situation, with Blastoise, Quagsire, and Squirtle aiding in extinguishing the flames. The wails of Dahlia's cries had Mark shaken. His hero was trapped inside, or worse, dead. In a daring move, he ran into the burning building with Charlie following closely. Mike tried to chase after them, but debris collapsed and barricaded the entrance. Mark and Charlie didn't know what part of the house they stood in, but they could hear voices, so followed them. They emerged out into the backyard where they encountered a mysterious woman dressed in a strange black spacesuit, half of her face covered with a mask. An aircraft appeared out of the smoke with a ladder descending.
Target has been secured. Over and out.
The woman said to an electronic device she held. Mark demanded answers about Ash, but the woman laughed. In a defensive move, Charlie used Ember. The woman tossed a Pokeball and released a Swoobat, which retaliated with Air Slash. Hydro Pump struck the Swoobat as Blastoise and Quagsire stood guard over Mark and Charlie. The woman returned the Swoobat before a ladder fell from the aircraft for her to grip. They ascended above the smoke and rocketed through the clouds within seconds. The smoke grew too thick, and Mark collapsed, his eyes falling into the darkness. Mark stirred awake in a hospital bed, a nebulizer mask gently covering his face. His concerned father, Mike, stood vigilantly beside him, flanked by Maven and Malcolm, the relief palpable at his awakening. Charlie, nestled comfortably between his legs, appeared serene and healthy. The room filled with warmth as Rachel and Anthony rushed in, their faces brightening at the sight of Mark's improved condition. Officer Jenny entered the scene hoping to ask Mark some questions. Mark told her about the strange woman he saw wearing the spacesuit. He added that he heard her say the target has been secured. Jenny confirmed no human remains were found at Dahlia's house that had now been destroyed. She added that they used a Pokemon translator to speak to Mr. Mime, who said it was doing chores in the house while Ash and Pikachu were relaxing in the backyard until it heard something like a helicopter followed by yelling. Suddenly, strange Pokemon attacked Mr. Mime, and he was sent crashing outside the house before it exploded. Mark confirmed he's seen an aircraft beneath the smoke, but couldn't describe it. He added the strange woman attacked him with a Swoobat, which made the group wonder, did she come from Unova or another region Swoobat reside? The group agreed on one thing: Ash Ketchum was kidnapped. Anthony spoke up, expressing suspicion at the timing of Silver's return to Viridian City, followed swiftly by Ash Ketchum's abduction. Officer Jenny reassured them that detectives from all regions were actively working on the case. Rachel raised a valid question about the potential rebirth of the United Organizations, despite most of its leaders being imprisoned or dead for 3 years. Jenny admitted uncertainty but refused to dismiss the possibility, suggesting the emergence of a new organization inspired by Giovani's ideals. She emphasized that any new leader would require substantial wealth to rival Giovani's resources. The following day, Mark received the green light to leave the hospital, greeted by a throng of reporters eager for answers. Sensing Charlie's distress amidst the flashing lights, Mark returned her to her Pokeball before being whisked away into Gary Oak's Jeep. The news of Ash Ketchum and Pikachu's kidnapping had spread globally, intensifying media scrutiny. Back at Oak Lab, reporters lingered outside, but Mark sought solace with Anthony and Rachel in the living room, immersing himself in the company of their Pokemon. Concerned about Dahlia Ketchum, Mark learned she was staying with the Oak family, remaining in her bedroom. Plans for the return to Johto were announced by Mike, prompting Mark's dismay. He pleaded for more time, but Mike mentioned their mother, Mia, had been worried sick and wanted her sons home. Frustrated, Mark retreated into Oak's expansive landscape, traversing until nightfall. The absence of Pokemon activity and the palpable sense of grief in the air mirrored his own anguish. As Mark sat by a tranquil lake, gazing at the moon, Charlie emerged from her Pokeball. He draped an arm around her, his sorrow palpable. "Charlie, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't be a better trainer for you. My hero needed help, and I couldn't save him."
You're not weak, Mark. You're super brave.
Rachel said, appearing behind Mark along with Anthony. Dude, you ran into a burning building. You have so much courage for a boy of 15, Anthony said. Marc expressed his desire to aid in the search for Ash, but admitted he felt lost about where to begin. Rachel gently advised him to entrust the investigation to the authorities and focus on his personal journey. She shared her own experience of nearly abandoning her dreams after her father's passing, but ultimately realized that persevering would honor his memory. Determined, she resolved to become the best coordinator in the world. Anthony opened up about growing up without a father and how his mother's sacrifices had shaped him into a resilient individual. He explained that embarking on his journey was his way of repaying her, intending to care for her as she had cared for him. Realizing that he couldn't solely focus on finding Ash, but could honor him by pursuing his own dream, Marc turned to his friends and shared his reluctance to return to Johto. Instead, he expressed his desire to stay in Kanto, to challenge its gyms, and compete in the Indigo Plateau. Rachel suggested he persuade his father to allow this endeavor and offered to accompany him, as she planned to travel the same routes for Pokémon contests. While Marc pursued gym badges, Rachel would participate in contests. Excited about the proposal, they turned to Anthony, wondering if he would join them. Anthony, uncertain of his own aspirations, expressed a desire to earn money to support his mother. Rachel mentioned seeking guidance from her uncle Gary, and the trio began strategizing how Marc could convince his father to approve his Kanto journey. Unbeknownst to them, Marc Masters and Gary Oak had been eavesdropping from nearby. Understanding Marc's desire to emulate his hero, Ash Ketchum, Mike acknowledged Ash's influence but emphasized the importance of Marc's individual journey. He permitted Marc to stay in Kanto as long as he traveled with his companions, and eventually competed in the Johto League to appease Grandpa Masters. Overjoyed, Marc embraced his father, thrilled to continue his adventure in Kanto. Gary turned to Anthony with a suggestion that sparked excitement within him. He proposed that Anthony should compete in the Junior Frontier tournaments, a series founded by the Don George Battle Club Incorporated. Specifically designed for novice trainers seeking to gain experience and obtain funds quickly, the Junior Frontier boasted 7 Frontier battle clubs scattered across Kanto. Each club featured distinct rules and rewards for both the victor and their Pokémon, but they all shared one commonality: a substantial prize of 15,000 Pokédollars for the winner. Gary elaborated further, revealing the glorious prospect awaiting the ultimate victor of all 7 tournaments. Not only would the champion claim a hefty sum of 105,000 Pokédollars by the end of their rookie year, but they would also earn the privilege to challenge any elite trainer in Kanto, from gym leaders to Elite Four members, even the reigning champion, Misty herself. Should they emerge triumphant, they would inherit their opponent's position and receive an additional 25,000 Pokédollars as a bonus. Gary emphasized that in the years since their inception, no rookie trainer had managed to conquer all 7 tournaments. Anthony, his enthusiasm ignited, pledged to enter the Junior Frontier tournaments and vowed to emerge victorious in each one, driven by his desire to support his mother. However, Anthony harbored a secret agenda. If he succeeded in claiming all 7 titles, he planned to select Silver as his elite trainer opponent, aiming to remove him from the Viridian City Gym and claim it for himself. The next day, Mike informed Maven and Malcolm of Marc's decision to remain in Kanto, pursuing the Kanto League and the Indigo Plateau with Anthony and Rachel as his companions. The news surprised them, as they had expected Marc to aim for the Silver Conference of the Johto League. Despite Marc's invitation for them to join, Maven and Malcolm declined, resolving to face him in battle when they next meet as experienced trainers. An emotional Mike embraced his son, wishing him luck in conveying their mother's approval, with a reminder for Marc to call her daily. After bidding farewell to the Oak family, Marc, Rachel, and Anthony left the lab. As they walked through Pallet Town, they released their Pokemon companions to join them. Approaching a forest, Marc paused, gazing back at Pallet Town. "I will find you," he whispered. The group entered the forest cautiously, the sounds of Pokemon making Marc uneasy, especially with Anthony's playful pranks. Their journey continued toward Viridian City, where Marc hoped to challenge Silver, though Anthony reminded him he needed 7 gym badges first. Rachel mentioned the absence of Pokemon contests in Viridian City, but noted the upcoming Junior Frontier tournament. Anthony eagerly scouted the forest for Pokemon to catch and trainers to battle. Feeling on edge, Marc and Charlie sensed something watching them. The forest sounds heightened their paranoia until a Ghastly emerged, startling them.
Hello, humans.
The ghost Pokemon spoke to their horror. Marc and Rachel screamed and fled, with Marc colliding into a tree, disturbing a Pidgey perched above. The agitated Pidgey attacked Marc, prompting Charlie to retaliate. Charlie growled, making the Pidgey change its focus to her. It tackled Charlie back, who fell into Marc's arms. Rachel called for Marc to give Charlie demands. Marc told Charlie to use Scratch, but Pidgey was quick and used Gust, sending both Marc and Charlie flying. Charlie found her bearings and used Ember before charging at Pidgey, hitting it with repeated scratches. Marc retrieved a Pokeball and tossed it at the Pidgey. The ball sucked it in and wiggled for a minute. Finally, the ball stopped flashing, and Marc had just caught his first Pokemon.
Pidgey has been registered to your Pokedex.
Celebrating his success, Marc danced with joy while Rachel congratulated him, and Anthony returned frustrated from his unsuccessful search for Pokemon and battles. Deciding to set up camp for the night, they hoped for more Pokemon encounters in the morning. Meanwhile, in an isolated island, a towering prison loomed, encircled by vigilant guards. As an airplane descended onto the runway, military figures awaited its arrival. The door opened, revealing Looker, a seasoned agent of the International Police who had recently returned to duty for a particular mission of utmost importance. Escorted through the prison, Looker passed cells housing menacing offenders, but his destination lay deeper within, the isolated chambers containing the most nefarious criminals. Presenting his keycard, he gained access to a heavily fortified area, descending hundreds of feet underground via an elevator. Emerging into a chamber guarded by 4 armed sentinels, Looker confronted a door guarded with multiple layers of security. Finally gaining entry, he found himself in a stark white room divided by bulletproof glass. Chained to the floor, a man in orange overalls, prevented from venturing closer than 5 feet to the glass, exuded a sinister aura. Seated opposite the prisoner, Looker's gaze locked with the figure, who initially kept his back turned, emitting a dark chuckle. With a chilling glare, the prisoner revealed to be Giovani, turned to face Looker.
Welcome back, Agent Looker. What do you need of me this time?
Giovanni's voice dripped with malice as he addressed Looker, anticipating his purpose.
Ash Ketchum's been kidnapped, and you're going to tell me why.
Marc and Rachel woke up gagging from Anthony farting the next morning. It was even that bad their Pokemon jumped out of their Pokeballs and ran out of the tent. Marc properly introduced his new Pidgey, Nimbus, to the other Pokemon. The Pidgey stood guard and challenged the other Pokemon to battle. It definitely had a passion for battling. To calm Pidgey down, Anthony agreed to battle it with his Dratini. The two had a back and forth match, but it was suddenly interrupted by Rachel, who called them with breakfast prepared. Rachel loved to cook, but Marc and Anthony had to wash up before they continued their hike out to the forest. The trio arrived at Viridian City, excited to get to the Pokemon Center to relax their feet and heal their Pokemon. Hillary, Anthony's mother, worked as a cleaner at the Pokemon Center. Upon seeing her son, she rushed over and showered him with affection, fussing over his Dratini and his new friends. Marc submitted his official application for the Indigo Plateau, while Anthony inquired with Nurse Joy about the Junior Frontier. As they discussed, Don George suddenly appeared, introducing himself and guiding them to the Viridian City Junior Frontier Battle Arena, where numerous young aspiring trainers were registering for the tournament. Anthony learned from Don George that in this specific Junior Frontier, trainers were required to use their first Pokemon throughout the entire tournament. Feeling relieved since he only had Dratini, Anthony noticed he was the oldest competitor and among the few not utilizing a Charmander, Bulbasaur, or Squirtle. Marc reassured him that this might work to his advantage, catching opponents off guard. As Anthony was escorted to the battle arena, he was surprised to find a full audience in attendance.
Oh, horsey crap.
Marc, Rachel, and Hillary sat in the audience, enthusiastically cheering him on, although Hillary's loud screams only served to embarrass Anthony further. The arena announcer introduced the panel of judges, which included Don George as one of them. The second judge was the esteemed former Elite Four member Bruno, and the third was the Viridian City gym leader Silver. As Silver's name was announced, the entire crowd erupted into boos. Don George leaned over and muttered to Bruno that it was the mayor of Viridian City who had decided on the third judge. Anthony seethed with anger as he watched Silver take his seat on the panel, waving at the crowd as if they were cheering for him. Meanwhile, the matchups were being displayed on the giant screen, revealing that Anthony was pitted against a 15-year-old boy named Ben. The other contestants were ordered backstage and Anthony was called to the battlefield, standing on the opposite side of Ben. Ben released his Squirtle from its Pokeball, triggering memories of Anthony's tie with Maven. Swiftly responding, Anthony commanded Dratini to use Leer, while Ben opted for Squirtle's Bubble Attack. However, the bubbles dispersed ineffectively, failing to reach Dratini. Seizing the opportunity, Dratini unleashed Twister, swiftly defeating Squirtle with a one-hit KO. With the victory secured, Anthony advanced to the next round, though Hillary's tearful pride was evident among the cheering crowd. Anthony shook Ben's hand, who revealed he just got a Squirtle an hour ago. After the exchange, Anthony made his way to the backstage area, only to catch Silver's gaze fixed upon him as he turned around. Marc and Rachel video called Anthony, who sat backstage waiting for round 2. Dratini had been fed and the two decided to go for a walk around the building. He noticed Silver suspiciously walking through the hallway with a stern-looking man who was joined by security. Anthony, under his breath, mentioned it was Mayor Curson, as he watched the two enter a private room while the tournament was on break. Anthony tried to listen, but the hallway was getting crowded for the next round. His name was called, and he was up against a bug catcher named Colton, who called out his Caterpie. He ordered it to use String Shot, which stopped Dratini in its tracks. Caterpie was fast and tackled Dratini hard. Dratini used Leer to keep Caterpie back. The dragon broke out of the web and wrapped its tail around Caterpie and slammed it to the ground. Anthony called for Twister and it hit Caterpie to receive their second victory. Glancing up at the panel, he noticed Silver had only just returned to his seat and had missed his match. The third match saw the semifinals. Anthony was up against a girl named Susan who called out her Zubat. Rachel was shaking in the audience, questioning why this girl had a Zubat as her starter.
Dirty poison type!
Dratini came out full of confidence as the previous wins made it determined. However, Zubat was super fast and hit Dratini with an Absorb. Dratini used Twister, but Zubat dodged and hit Dratini with an Astonish. Anthony was getting frustrated as Twisters kept missing. It then got worse when Zubat hit Dratini with a Supersonic. Dratini was confused and kept hitting itself. Zubat used more Astonishes, and Dratini was taking a lot of damage. Dratini unleashed a powerful howling scream. Its ears illuminated in a burst of yellow hues as bolts of lightning erupted from its body, striking Zubat. With this surge of energy, Dratini mastered Thunder Wave, causing Zubat to collapse to the ground, its body enveloped in sparkling bolts. Dratini used two powerful Twisters to finish the match. Anthony had made it to the finals. Marc, Rachel, and Hillary were jumping with excitement. Anthony turned and caught Silver's intense gaze once more. Smirking confidently, he offered a cocky salute in Silver's direction. The final round commenced, pitting Anthony against Chris, who greeted him with a sinister grin. As Chris released his Pokeball, a formidable Charmeleon emerged, startling Dratini. Chris proudly disclosed his recent success in Junior Frontier tournaments, boasting 3 consecutive wins, an achievement that stood as the Kanto Junior Frontier record. Marc couldn't hide his admiration for Chris's Charmeleon, marveling at its evolution within a mere 2 months. With keen interest, he summoned Charlie from her Pokeball, eager for her to observe and gain valuable experience from the intense battle ahead. Charmeleon used a mighty flamethrower, but Dratini dodged. It quickly wrapped its body around Charmeleon, who responded with Fire Fang. Dratini fell back, shaking off the pain. It used Twister and Charmeleon used Dragon Breath. The collision caused a small explosion. Anthony ordered Dratini to use Thunder Wave, but Charmeleon used Smoke Screen, consuming the battlefield in black smog. Blinded by the assault, Dratini struggled to see through the thick black fog enveloping the arena. Yet amidst the darkness, it discerned an ominous orange glow. Before it could react, a scorching blaze of fire struck Dratini, propelling it violently into the arena wall with a resounding crash. As the smog dissipated, revealing the aftermath of the intense battle, Dratini emerged, still moving despite the devastating blow it had endured. With sheer determination, it pulled itself upright, growling defiantly at Charmeleon. However, before Dratini could retaliate, Charmeleon unleashed another powerful Dragon Breath attack. Struck once more, Dratini faltered, unable to continue the battle. The victory was awarded to Chris, who emerged as the winner of the Viridian City Junior Frontier, securing his 4th consecutive win overall. While acknowledging Anthony's valiant effort, Chris noted that there was still much for him to learn before ascending to higher levels of competition. Chris then approached the stage to claim his winner's medal and prizes. Silver approached Anthony, who cradled a weary Dratini in his arms. With a stern expression, Silver offered advice, emphasizing the importance of training and urging Anthony to prioritize Dratini's well-being, knowing when to retreat from battle to prevent harm.
You know nothing about how to treat Pokemon or people! Just like your father!
Anthony yelled, and Silver flinched.
Watch your tongue, kid, or I will humble you and show these people you are nothing but a failure.
Anthony's rage was about to propel him towards Silver, but Marc and Rachel intervened, pulling him back and attempting to soothe his emotions. Don George approached Anthony, presenting him with a silver medal as a symbol of his achievement. To Anthony's surprise, his Pokédex updated, revealing that he had also earned a prize fund of 5,000 Pokédollars as the runner-up, a revelation that astonished him. Embraced by his overwhelmed mother, Anthony's initial shock transformed into a sense of pride and gratitude. Determined to help his family, he handed the prize money to his mother, who expressed her gratitude and promised to use it to improve their living conditions. As Hillary returned to work, Anthony made his way to the diner of the Pokemon Center, where Marc, Rachel, and their Pokemon were gathered at the diner. Rachel asked Anthony about his intense animosity towards Silver, noting that it appeared to surpass that of most people. Anthony hesitated, choosing his words carefully as he kept his response deliberately vague. He briefly alluded to the suffering his family endured due to Giovani's initiation of the Pokemon War 3 years prior. With a sense of worry, he expressed his fear that Silver harbored similar intentions. Marc attempted to lighten the heavy atmosphere by expressing gratitude to Anthony for serving as an inspiration during the tournament. With newfound confidence and determination, Marc announced his readiness to pursue his first gym badge, which awaited them at Pewter City. However, before they could reach their destination, the trio would need to navigate through the challenges of Viridian Forest.
As Marc, Rachel, and Anthony ventured into Viridian Forest, Marc's nerves were on edge, the dense foliage and unfamiliar surroundings unsettling him. However, the distractions provided by their encounters with bug-type trainers proved to be a welcome relief. Engaging in battles alongside Anthony, Marc found himself gradually growing more confident as they faced off against their opponents, gaining valuable experience with each encounter. The morning brought a significant milestone for Anthony as he successfully captured his first Pokemon, a Spearow. Empowered by his new companion, Anthony demonstrated his prowess in battle, emerging victorious against bug types. As a Pikachu burst out from the bushes, Marc and Rachel couldn't contain their excitement, their voices ringing out with joy at the unexpected encounter. However, their delight quickly turned into a small argument over who should have the privilege of catching the electrifying Pokemon. Marc expressed his long-standing desire to capture a Pikachu, citing his admiration for his hero Ash Ketchum, whose iconic companion Pikachu had become a symbol of determination and friendship. Meanwhile, Rachel interjected, stating her preference for capturing Pokemon that evolved through the use of evolutionary stones, with Pikachu being one such Pokemon. As Marc and Rachel engaged in the debate over who should catch the Pikachu, their conversation was abruptly interrupted by the arrival of a man who introduced himself as Samurai. With a piercing gaze, Samurai questioned whether either of them hailed from the town of Pallet. Rachel, feeling a sense of hesitation, tentatively admitted that she was born in the Hoenn region but was mostly raised in Pallet Town. Sensing an opportunity for a challenge, Samurai wasted no time in issuing a direct challenge to Rachel, proposing a battle to test her skills as a trainer. However, before Rachel could respond, Anthony interjected, offering to take on Samurai in her place. Yet Samurai remained resolute, insisting that he would only engage in battle with a new trainer from Pallet Town, viewing it as a crucial test to determine their worthiness to proceed further. As Rachel bravely accepted Samurai's challenge and sent out her Eevee, tension mounted in the air. Samurai unleashed his formidable pencil, its sharp horns looming ominously. Eevee hesitated, clearly intimidated by the imposing Pokémon before her. Before either trainer could issue commands, their attention was abruptly diverted by a shadow looming over them. To their astonishment, a vast swarm of over 100 Butterfree graced the skies, captivating the group with their graceful flight. However, the tranquility was shattered by the sudden emergence of another swarm, this time consisting of over 100 Beedrill. The air resonated with the buzzing of wings as the two opposing forces clashed in a tumultuous battle above. Realizing the imminent danger posed by the chaotic skirmish, the group hastily sought cover as Poison Sting and Stun Spore rained down from the sky. Concern etched on their faces, they watched with apprehension as wild Pokémon became unwitting casualties caught in the crossfire. Amidst the chaos, Mark's keen eye caught sight of a distressed Caterpie and Weedle perilously trapped beneath the raging battle. The two little bugs seemed to be crying up at their kin, almost pleading for them to stop fighting. Mark and Anthony exchanged glances and sprang into action, seizing their Pokeballs, tossing them through the air. Mark's caught Caterpie and Anthony's caught Weedle, rescuing them from harm's way just in the nick of time.
Caterpie has been registered to your Pokedex.
Mark and Anthony wasted no time in regrouping with Rachel and Samurai, their hearts pounding with adrenaline as they faced the impending danger. However, their respite was short-lived, as a portion of the battling Butterfree and Beedrill took notice of the trainers and began to pursue them relentlessly. With urgency gripping their hearts, the group raced towards safety, following Samurai as he led them to his nearby cabin. Breathless and with hearts still racing, they sought refuge within the confines of Samurai's cabin, the sturdy walls providing a temporary sanctuary from the chaos unfolding outside. Samurai feared something was seriously wrong. He never encountered Butterfree that were so aggressive for no reason. Samurai asked Mark and Anthony to bring out their newly caught bug types. He explained he was a bug-type whisperer and would be able to communicate with their Pokemon in hopes to learn what has caused this war. As Caterpie and Weedle emerged from their Pokeballs, Rachel instinctively took a step back from Weedle, mindful of its poison-type characteristics. Meanwhile, the trio observed with a mixture of amusement and cringing as Samurai attempted to communicate with the bug-type Pokemon through a series of comical sounds and gestures. However, their attention quickly shifted as they noticed Caterpie and Weedle standing closely together, their demeanor suggesting a bond of friendship between the two newly captured Pokemon. With Samurai's keen insight as a bug-type whisperer, he relayed to the trio the startling revelation that the aggression displayed by the Butterfree and Beedrill was entirely uncharacteristic. According to Caterpie and Weedle, the conflict had erupted seemingly out of nowhere after waking from a slumber. Mark wondered if it may have something to do with Darkrai, as their aggression began after waking up. But Samurai believed that to be impossible. Weedle and Caterpie anxiously thumped at the door, eager to go outside. The group remained concerned for the innocent Pokemon in the forest. Samurai, taking action, contacted Pokemon Control and proposed they venture out to protect as many Pokemon as possible until further assistance arrived. Charlie, Nimbus, Eevee, Dratini, Spearow, and Pinsir were released, poised for battle. Rachel's heart raced with anticipation, knowing they would encounter numerous poison-type Beedrill in the forest. The group charged into action, directing their Pokemon to unleash attacks on the rampaging Butterfree and Beedrill. As chaos ensued, Samurai called out for the innocent Pokemon to seek shelter within his cabin for safety. Despite their efforts, many Pokemon fell victim to the poisonous attacks of the Beedrill, rendering them immobile. Mark and the others sprang into action, rushing to aid the incapacitated Pokemon and ferrying them to safety within the cabin. Despite being outnumbered, their own Pokemon fought valiantly. Nimbus and Spearow succumbed to Butterfree's sleep powder and were recalled into their Pokeballs. Eevee utilized Attract, immobilizing a significant portion of the Butterfree and Beedrill, while Charlie unleashed Ember and Dratini conjured a Twister. Meanwhile, Pinsir focused on rescuing the distressed wild Pokémon, determined to protect them from harm amidst the chaos of battle. As Charlie, Eevee, and Dratini grew weary from the relentless onslaught, they found themselves bombarded by multiple Psybeams from the Butterfree. Sensing imminent danger, Marc, Anthony, and Rachel leaped into action, selflessly diving over their Pokémon to shield them from harm as the Beedrill charged with their stingers poised for attack. In a remarkable display of courage, Caterpie and Weedle now evolved into Metapod and Kakuna, hurled themselves in front of their trainers, unleashing a blinding white light that stunned the oncoming Beedrill. With their bodies now hardened, they braced themselves for the impending strikes. Despite the impact, the cracks that appeared in the stingers of the Beedrill revealed their weakened state. Metapod and Kakuna wasted no time, bouncing from one opponent to another, using their newly hardened bodies to deliver powerful blows to both the Beedrill and Butterfree. However, their valiant efforts did not come without a cost. Kakuna succumbed to Butterfree's Psybeam, while Metapod endured the assault of the Beedrill's Pin Missile. Collapsing into the arms of Marc and Anthony, their bodies began to glow once more, undergoing a remarkable transformation. In an awe-inspiring moment, Metapod evolved into a majestic Butterfree, while Kakuna evolved into a formidable Beedrill, ready to turn the tide of battle with their newfound strength and power. Marc's Butterfree soared high above the war of bug types, while Anthony's Beedrill distracted him. Butterfree used a large quantity of sleep powder, and all the rogue Beedrill and Butterfree fell to the ground in a slumber. Marc and the others ran to the cabin to avoid being put to sleep. They waited for the sleep powder to stop raining before exiting the cabin. Butterfree and Beedrill dived on top of Marc and Anthony to embrace them. Rachel followed Samurai with full heals to spray the sick, innocent Pokémon and wondered what to do with the sleeping rogue bug types.
What would have caused them to be so violent?
Rachel asked.
That would be me.
A voice spoke. She let out a piercing scream, seeking refuge behind Marc and Anthony.
Dirty poison
The group was taken aback when they realized the Ghastly could speak, with Samurai confirming its use of psychic abilities. Marc inquired whether this was the same Ghastly that had previously startled them in the Pallet Town forest. The Ghastly affirmed its identity and explained that it had utilized its confusion ability to manipulate the minds of the Butterfree and Beedrill. However, it clarified that its actions were motivated by self-preservation, as it had been pursued by hunters. In an attempt to ward off its pursuers, the Ghastly had unwittingly spiraled events out of control, leading to the chaotic situation that had unfolded. Suddenly, Ghastly's ethereal form was engulfed in pink lights, rendering it immobile. Emerging from the bushes, a Drowsy appeared, its psychic abilities restraining Ghastly. The Drowsy was accompanied by a man and a woman, both clad in black combat suits adorned with a sinister purple J crest. And despite their military-like attire, the malevolent aura emanating from them hinted at darker intentions. As Marc observed this sinister trio, his mind raced with thoughts of the mysterious woman in the black spacesuit who had kidnapped Ash. Could these individuals be connected to her in some way? The possibility sent a shiver down his spine, filling him with a sense of urgency to intervene. Stepping forward, Marc confronted the intruders, demanding they cease their assault on Ghastly and leave it alone. With determination etched on his face, Marc stood his ground, ready to protect Ghastly from any further harm. As the man and woman addressed Marc, they revealed themselves to be Levi and Madison, members of a newly formed group called Team Justice. With an air of authority, they proclaimed their intent to enlist Ghastly as their newest Pokémon, citing their mission to restore justice to the world. The atmosphere grew tense as the Drowsy spoke in an ominous voice, confirming their affiliation with Team Justice and elaborating on their goal to cleanse the world of repercussions of the Pokémon War. Levi and Madison expressed their disdain for the conflicts instigated by figures like Ash and Giovani, emphasizing that their actions had resulted in the loss of many lives, including those dear to them. Despite their claims of noble intentions, Marc couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gripped him. The words of Levi and Madison painted a picture of vengeance and retribution, leaving him wary of their true motives and the potential consequences of their actions. Marc confronted Levi and Madison, accusing them of being behind Ash's kidnapping. However, they denied involvement, claiming they had larger goals in mind. Madison released a Clefairy from a Pokeball, its demeanor noticeably more aggressive than usual, while Levi summoned a Sandshrew. In response, Marc commanded Butterfree to use Gust, but Sandshrew swiftly dug underground to evade the attack. Meanwhile, Beedrill aimed Poison Sting at Clefairy, only for it to deflect the assault using Protect. Samurai directed Pinsir to confront Drowsy, prompting it to release Ghastly. However, Drowsy managed to evade Pinsir's attack and retaliated by using Hypnosis to lull it to sleep before delivering a powerful headbutt that sent Pinsir reeling back to Samurai. Sandshrew blasted out from beneath the ground. However, Butterfree soared too high. It used String Shot to contain the Sandshrew and then used Bug Bite. Drowsy dived on Butterfree, dragging it to the ground. Clefairy used Metronome and struck Beedrill with a Thunderbolt. A tired Beedrill and Butterfree managed to take flight, showing strength and determination. Rachel stepped forward with Eevee jumping off her shoulder. Eevee used Attract, causing Drowsy, Sandshrew, and Clefairy to be immobilized. Ghastly hovered above them and conjured a massive Shadow Ball, hitting all 3 Pokemon. A frustrated Levi and Madison returned Sandshrew and Clefairy to their Pokeballs, but not Drowsy. Instead, Levi carried him on his shoulder, and rocket fire shot out of their backs, revealing they wore jetpacks, and they soared up into the clouds. The trainers fell to their knees from exhaustion. Sirens echoed through the forest, and the Pokemon Control joined by medics arrived at the scene. They healed all the injured Pokemon, including the rogue bug types who were a lot calmer than they were before, and they flew back to their homes in peace. Marc and Anthony extended an invitation to their newly caught Butterfree and Beedrill to officially join their team, a proposition that both Pokemon eagerly accepted. Marc looked fondly at his Butterfree and decided to nickname it Wilfred. With a sense of camaraderie, Wilfred and Beedrill willingly returned to their Pokeballs, ready to embark on their journey together with Marc, Anthony, and their other Pokemon companions. The trio spent the day assisting lost Pokemon and reuniting with their families, fostering a sense of unity within the forest. As evening fell, they joined Samurai for dinner, sharing stories and camaraderie. Later, Rachel engaged in a friendly battle with Samurai, during which Eevee emerged victorious after a hard-fought match. Impressed by Eevee's performance, Samurai commended her battling prowess and inquired about her desired evolution. Rachel, however, emphasized that the decision would ultimately be left up to Eevee, honoring her companion's autonomy and individuality. After bidding farewell to Samurai, the trio resumed their journey with Ghastly persistently trailing behind them, much to Rachel's unease.
I have decided. I choose you to be my human.
Ghastly said to Marc.
And before you try to give me a stupid little name, I've already got one. My name is Gasper, the friendly ghost Pokemon.
Marc's excitement remained undimmed as he gazed up at Gasper with a grin. Taking out a Pokeball, he tossed it at the ghost type, successfully capturing the Ghastly and adding it to his growing team.
Ghastly has been registered to your Pokedex.
With Gasper now officially part of the group, they made their way towards Pewter City, where Marc's first gym battle awaited. As they journeyed onward, anticipation and determination filled the air, propelling them forward towards their next adventure. As Marc, Rachel, and Anthony arrived at Pewter City, they noticed the Pokemon Center was bustling with activity, with many gym challengers seeking healing for their defeated Pokemon. Concerned by the sight, Marc suggested they adjourn to the diner to strategize for his upcoming battle.
Who's the Pewter City gym leader?
His name is Forrest.
Oh, he sounds like a grass-type trainer with that name.
No, he's actually a rock-type specialist.
Before Marc could voice his thoughts about Forrest, his attention was drawn to a voice across the room. A doctor was consoling a distressed trainer about their injured Pokemon, prompting Marc to pause, his curiosity piqued by the conversation. With excitement bubbling inside him, Marc leapt from his seat upon realizing that the doctor was none other than Brock, the former Pewter City gym leader and a childhood friend of Ash Ketchum, as well as the older brother of the current gym leader, Forrest. Eagerly, Marc approached Brock and introduced himself, thrilled to meet such a renowned figure. However, as Marc mentioned his lifelong admiration for Ash Ketchum, Brock's expression abruptly shifted, his demeanor turning hostile. Sternly, he informed Marc that he had numerous Pokemon to attend to, many of which were injured at his brother's gym, effectively ending their conversation. As Marc turned around, he found himself face to face with Victor, the trainer he had encountered at Oak Laboratory who proudly displayed his Pewter City gym badge. Victor boasted about being the first trainer to defeat Forrest in weeks and inquired if Marc had caught any more Pokémon since they last met. Marc revealed his recent catches, Pidgey, Butterfree, and Ghastly, aka Nimbus, Gasper, and Wilfred. Victor laughed mockingly at Marc's party, dismissing it as weak and unsuitable for earning the Boulder badge. He then revealed his newest Pokémon, Ammonite, which he had revived from the Helix fossil found in Mount Moon. Victor emphasized how his Kabuto and Ammonite's water typing had secured his victory over Forrest. He taunted Marc, reminding him of the disadvantage his Charmander, Pidgey, and Butterfree faced against rock types, and scoffed at the perceived lack of combat prowess in Marc's Ghastly.
I think we showed this dusty little bone scavenger a lesson, Master.
Undeterred by Victor's taunts, Marc boldly issued a challenge to him, proposing an official battle. To Marc's surprise, Victor accepted, acknowledging that the prize money would come in handy after spending his funds on reviving Ammonite. Additionally, Marc recognized the opportunity for his own Pokémon to gain practice against rock types. Eager to test their skills, Marc, Rachel, and Anthony joined Victor on the training battlefield behind the Pokémon Center, Victor exuding confidence, suggesting they each use their respective teams, Marc with all 4 of his Pokémon and Victor with his 2 fossil Pokémon. The battle commenced with Marc leading with Nimbus, while Victor sent out Ammonite. Marc commanded Nimbus to execute a gust attack, but it proved ineffective against Ammonite. In response, Ammonite retaliated with Rollout, prompting Nimbus to evade by flying above the attack. However, Ammonite swiftly countered with a water gun, striking Nimbus and causing it to falter. Despite the direct hits, Nimbus valiantly struggled to continue the fight. Marc ordered a wing attack, but Victor instructed Ammonite to withdraw into his shell, mitigating the impact of Pidgey's attack. The collision appeared to take a toll on Nimbus, leaving it vulnerable as Ammonite seized the opportunity to deliver a decisive blow with another rollout, ultimately securing the victory for Ammonite in the battle. A frustrated Marc returned Nimbus and sent out Wilfred. It hit Ammonite with a side beam, which resulted in it to be confused. Ammonite couldn't focus and was repeatedly hit by Wilfred's tackles, but that only did minor damage. A yelling Victor ordered Ammonite to use Water Gun on itself, and it sprayed itself out of confusion. Marc called Wilfred to use Sleep Powder, but Ammonite used Rollout to avoid it. Ammonite used the Water Gun then Rollout combination like it did with Pidgey to strike down Butterfree. The bug type managed to take flight, to which Victor praised Butterfree's tenacity, but added it's still a weakling. Marc called for Stun Spore, and Victor called for another Water Gun. Both moves hit. Wilfred was unable to battle, and Ammonite was stuck with paralysis. Gasper was sent out next. Marc called it to use Shadow Ball, and it hit Ammonite, who couldn't move, and it was unable to battle. With a confident smile, Victor sent out his Kabuto, catching Gasper off guard with an immediate Aqua Jet that left it reeling. Following up swiftly, Kabuto unleashed an Ancient Power attack, knocking Gasper out cold. In response, Marc sent out Charlie, who bravely launched into a series of scratches against Kabuto. However, Kabuto's hardened defense dulled the impact of Charlie's claws, and her Ember attack proved similarly ineffective. Kabuto capitalized on Charlie's momentary vulnerability induced by Leer, striking it with successive Aqua Jet and Hidden Power attacks. Despite the relentless assault, Charlie refused to yield. Summoning her strength, she let out a defiant roar before unleashing a powerful blast of blue flame, Dragon Breath. Marc cheered with excitement at this newfound ability. Encouraged by the success of her new move, Marc ordered Charlie to use Dragon Breath once more, but Kabuto swiftly dodged the attack with Aqua Jet and countered with a fierce strike. Yet, Charlie remained resolute, refusing to admit defeat. "Charlie, it's okay! You don't have to keep battling!" Marc cried, but Charlie roared again. As the battle reached its climax, Charlie unleashed a third Dragon Breath while Kabuto retaliated with Ancient Power. The powerful collision struck both Pokémon. Charlie was left lying unconscious, while Kabuto barely pulled itself up to stand. The match was declared over and Kabuto was named the victor. However, the victory was short-lived as Kabuto collapsed mere seconds later, exhausted from the intense battle. Marc rushed to Charlie's side, concern etched on his face, while Victor grinned triumphantly as he returned Kabuto. Without a word, Victor turned and walked away. Anthony and Rachel attempted to console Marc, but tears welled up in his eyes as he struggled to contain his emotions. Without a word, he returned Charlie to her Pokeball and bolted through the Pokemon Center and out into the city, leaving his friends behind. Concerned for Mark, Anthony and Rachel were at a loss for what to do until they were approached by Dr. Brock, accompanied by his Blissey. Brock assured them that he would go in search of Mark and advised them to wait at the Pokemon Center for his return. Meanwhile, Brock and Blissey wandered through the bustling streets until they eventually found Mark seated alone in a quiet courtyard, gazing at the flower beds. Taking a seat beside him, Brock gently offered to have Blissey take care of Mark's Pokemon for him. Mark handed over his Pokeballs and Blissey jogged back to the Pokemon Center with them in tow. Brock praised Mark's efforts in battle, mentioning he hadn't seen a trainer with such heart since Ash Ketchum. He then offered a heartfelt apology for his earlier sternness, explaining that his feelings towards Ash were complicated due to their fallout after the Pokemon War. Opening up about his own struggles, Brock revealed the depth of his disagreement with Ash's methods during the war, which led to a rift between them. He shared the pain of losing loved ones and Pokemon during those tumultuous times, a sorrow compounded by the fact that some perished on his own operating table. Despite harboring resentment towards Ash for a time, Brock acknowledged the widespread adoration for the world champion garnered as a hero. However, news of Ash's and Pikachu's kidnapping left Brock feeling a profound sense of sadness and guilt, prompting him to reflect on their fractured relationship. He emphasized to Mark the importance of cherishing the meaningful moments in life, and cautioned against losing sight of what truly matters amidst the pursuit of dreams. Acknowledging Brock's words, Mark realized the importance of living in the present and decided to shift his focus to the upcoming battle with Forrest. Brock assured Mark that his brother was an exceptional gym leader, even stronger than himself, and possessed a fervent passion for battling. He explained that Forrest's aggressive battling style was driven by his dedication to helping new trainers grow. Brock surmised that Victor's decision to use only 2 Pokemon in their battle was likely an attempt to simulate the conditions Mark would face against Forrest. Rather than being cocky, Victor may have been subtly preparing Mark for the intensity of his brother's battles. Brock praised his Charmander for learning Dragon Breath, but felt it wouldn't be enough to defeat Forrest. Brock revealed when he was in medical school, he had a part-time job as a Pokemon move tutor, and he wanted to help boost Mark's Pokemon that will assist him against Forrest. Mark thanked Brock for their conversation, and the two headed to the Pokemon Center. Mark joined his worried friends at the diner, and they had something to eat before Blissey and Brock returned with Mark's Pokemon.
"How about a test run, kid? Battle me,"
Brock said, and Mark's jaw fell. They headed back to the battlefield. Brock sent out his rock-type Sudowoodo, and Mark sent out Charlie. Mark scanned Charlie with his Pokedex, and his astonishment at Charlie's newly learned Metal Claw quickly turned into determination as he strategized his next move. Mark quickly called for Metal Claw, but Sudowoodo dodged and used Hammer Arm, bashing Charlie into the ground. Sudowoodo used Stone Edge. Giant rocks were falling all over Charlie. Mark called for another Metal Claw, and Charlie slashed her steel claws through the rocks, turning them into pebbles. Charlie used Dragon Breath, hitting Sudowoodo, causing it to be paralyzed. Charlie seized the opportunity, unleashing a powerful Metal Claw attack that left Sudowoodo unable to continue the battle. Mark was in complete shock. He defeated Brock in a Pokemon battle. Anthony and Rachel danced around him with excitement as if he had won the Pokemon League. Brock revealed Mark was ready to face Forrest, and after giving Charlie a super potion, the group headed to Pewter City Gym. A gang of young Geodude was playing in the garden beside the gym. They bounced towards Brock and dove on him with affection. One in particular wrapped its arms around Mark's legs, hugging him tight. Mark struggled to walk and fell forward, eliciting laughter from the group. They entered the rock-type gym, and Brock called for Forrest, introducing him to Mark. Forrest expressed that he had only countered one decent challenger over the past few weeks and hoped Mark wouldn't disappoint. Brock, Rachel, and Anthony traveled up to the seating area, while a referee walked out to the battlefield. 4 teenagers charged at Brock as they entered the gym. He introduced them as his younger siblings Susie, Timmy, Billy, and Tilly. He sadly mentioned that he had lost his parents, 4 other siblings, and his beloved Steelix in the Pokemon War. The youngest 4 weren't old enough to fight, for which he was grateful. He wished none of his family members had to participate, but they all wanted to fight by Ash's side and bring down Giovani. The referee announced the rules. Mark was allowed to use all the Pokemon in his party and could switch Pokemon anytime he wished. Forrest could only use 2 Pokemon and could not switch mid-battle. Forrest tossed a Pokeball and out came a Geodude. This one was larger than the others Mark had met outside and had aggression in its eyes. Marc quickly commanded Wilfred to use Silent, but Geodude countered with a rollout, reminiscent of Victor's tactics in their previous battle. However, Geodude managed to launch its body high while rolling like a missile, bashing into Butterfree. Forrest then called for Rock Throw. The giant rock hurled towards Wilfred until Marc ordered it to use Energy Ball, a move Brock had taught it. The giant rock was blasted into sand, shocking both Forrest and his Geodude. However, some sand got into Wilfred's eyes, causing it to be slightly blinded. Marc urged Wilfred to listen for Geodude and use Energy Ball again. The green sphere collided with Geodude, but it used Defense Curl to push through the attack. It then followed up with Smackdown, and the partially blinded Butterfree couldn't dodge, resulting in it being struck down for the KO. Marc returned Wilfred and sent out Nimbus. Forrest remarked that he would have laughed, but was expecting some surprises from Marc, suggesting he might have had a guardian angel as he glanced at Brock. Forrest ordered Geodude to use another defense curl, and Marc commanded Nimbus to use Steel Wing. Nimbus struck Geodude, causing it some damage. In response, Geodude unleashed Rock Tomb, hitting Pidgey, but it showed its determination and took flight again. It dove down with another Steel Wing, but Geodude managed to dodge. Unfortunately, the metal wing pierced into a boulder, trapping Nimbus. Seizing the opportunity, Geodude used Rollout, knocking Pidgey into unconsciousness. Marc was becoming frustrated. Even with Brock teaching his Pokemon super effective moves, Forrest proved to be strong. Gasper was sent out. Marc called for Hypnosis, but Geodude evaded it with a Rollout. Marc then ordered Gasper to use Icy Wind, a move taught by Brock. This struck Geodude and slowed it down. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Gasper followed up with a Shadow Ball, blasting Geodude for the KO. Forrest expressed his enjoyment of the battle with Marc, but suggested that the end was near. He tossed his Pokeball, and out came a monstrous Rhyhorn.
Is it time to switch out, Master?
Marc gave Gasper some encouragement and ordered it to use Icy Wind. However, Rhyhorn quickly used Dig to evade the attack and emerged blasting out. It followed up with a Mega Horn on Ghastly, causing it to collapse. Despite this, Gasper managed to hover back up and retaliated with Confusion, sending Rhyhorn crashing through a boulder. Gasper then unleashed Shadow Ball, but Rhyhorn countered with Rock Blast, resulting in a powerful explosion. Emerging from the dust, Rhyhorn charged forward and pounced on Gasper, delivering a super effective crunch. Ghastly was unable to continue the battle. Marc sent out Charlie, who roared at Rhyhorn with great courage. Charlie then used Dragon Breath, striking Rhyhorn, but failing to paralyze it. In response, Rhyhorn countered with Mega Horn, dealing minor damage. Forrest called for Rock Blast, but Charlie destroyed the rocks with Metal Claw and charged at Rhyhorn, slashing it with a direct hit. Rhyhorn sustained significant damage, but managed to rise back up. It then dug underground and emerged with a super effective move, hitting Charlie hard. Though Charlie was still able to battle, Marc decided to call it back. The group was puzzled by Marc's decision, as he seemingly had no other Pokemon left to switch out. Or did he? Marc surprised everyone by throwing a Pokeball, summoning a Bellsprout. Rachel and Anthony were stunned by this revelation. Marc explained that he had caught Bellsprout by the flower beds in the courtyard just before Brock had found him. Bellsprout was his 5th Pokemon. Rachel sighed, noting that it was another poison type joining their group.
Dirty poison type!
While Brock looked on with a proud smile. Bellsprout unleashed Vine Whip, surprising everyone with its strength as it picked up Rhyhorn and slammed it into the ground. Despite the impact, Rhyhorn rose to its feet, shaking off the daze. Another Vine Whip was launched towards it, prompting Rhyhorn to dig underground and strike Bellsprout with Dig, causing significant damage. Seeing Bellsprout in distress, Marc called for it to use Stun Spore, successfully paralyzing Rhyhorn. Marc quickly recalled Bellsprout and brought Charlie back out onto the field. "I want to win this with you, Charlie!" Marc cheered, and Charlie responded by sprinting at the stunned Rhyhorn and slashing it with Metal Claw. Rhyhorn was unable to battle. The match had gone to Charlie and Marc of New Bark Town. Marc held back tears as he received his first gym badge, the Boulder Badge. Charlie, Anthony, and Rachel dove on him with excitement. Even the young Geodude embraced Marc, knocking him over. Marc's Pokedex informed him he had received 3,000 Pokédollars for defeating his first gym leader. Brock placed his hand on Marc's shoulder, telling him he should be proud, and he thanked Marc. For the first time in years, he felt hope. He believed that Ash would be found and they would reconcile, as they had a lot to catch up on. A Nurse Joy in casual wear entered the gym with a baby in her arms. Brock introduced her as his wife, and she held their son Flint, named after his late father. Rachel doted over baby Flint, and Mark didn't get the chance to hold him as the young Geodude tugged at his leg. Brock handed Mark a Pokeball, mentioning it belonged to the young Geodude who seemed to be very fond of him. Brock wanted him to take the Geodude along and create amazing memories, just as Brock had with his Geodude. Mark took the Pokeball and the happy young Geodude dove inside, becoming Mark's 6th Pokemon.
Geodude has been registered to your Pokédex.
Anthony praised Mark for already obtaining a party of 6. You know what they say, gotta catch 'em all. After earning his first Kanto gym badge, Mark, Anthony, and Rachel awoke the next morning feeling invigorated as they entered the bustling Pokemon Center cafeteria for a celebratory breakfast. Mark sent out all 6 of his Pokemon: Charlie, Nimbus, Wilfred, Gasper, and his 2 newest team members, Rowan the Bellsprout and Rocco the Geodude. With excitement to see Mark, Rocco bounced and wrapped his arms around Mark's legs, tipping him over. With enthusiasm bubbling within them, Anthony released his Dratini, Spearow, and Beedrill, while Rachel proudly unveiled her Eevee. The Pokemon's diverse array filled the room with an air of anticipation, igniting Rachel's determination to expand her team and prepare for her debut in the upcoming contest in Cerulean City. As they savored their breakfast, Anthony consulted the map displayed on his trusty Rotom phone. According to this, our journey will take us through Mount Moon, where Clefairy are known to reside. Rachel's eyes sparked with excitement at the prospect as she always wanted to catch a Clefairy. Before they could leave Pewter City, Anthony hoped to participate in the Junior Frontier Tournament scheduled for later that day. Seizing the opportunity, he spotted Don George, a seasoned expert in Pokemon battles, dining at a nearby table. Anthony wasted no time and approached him to inquire about the tournament. Don George shared the details of the Pewter City Junior Frontier Tournament.
Here in Pewter City, the Junior Frontier consists of just one round, but what a round it is! Picture this: 100 Pokemon all gathered on a high platform suspended above a swimming pool. It's an all-out Poke Battle Royale, where the goal is simple yet exhilarating. Knock your opponents off the platform and be the last Pokemon standing.
Anthony listened intently, absorbing every word of Don George's explanation.
But here's the catch. Each Pokemon can only use one move throughout the entire match. It's a test of strategy and endurance. Choose wisely, my boy.
Nodding in understanding, Anthony considered the implications of this rule. So, it's all about selecting a move with both power and longevity.
Exactly! And no flying types or Pokemon with Levitate allowed. We want a fair competition after all.
Don George also mentioned that not only would the winner receive 15,000 Pokédollars, but prizes would be a monthly supply of Pokemon food and medical supplies. Don George eagerly warned that there were only 2 vacancies left for this afternoon's tournament. Feeling a tap on his back, Anthony turned to find Rachel standing there, a hopeful expression on her face. She voiced her desire to participate in the tournament, not for the prizes, but as an opportunity for her Eevee to gain valuable experience performing in front of an audience. Anthony's face lit up with delight at Rachel's proposal. He welcomed her participation with open arms, thrilled at the prospect of competing alongside her. With excitement bubbling between them, they swiftly registered for the tournament and made their way to the battle arena. Meanwhile, Mark, eager to support his friends, bid them luck before settling into the audience. As he entered the stands, he spotted Brock and Forrest among the spectators. Joining them, Mark took his seat, ready to cheer on Anthony and Rachel. As Anthony and Rachel prepared their Pokemon backstage for the intense battle royale, they encountered Chris, the formidable opponent who had bested Anthony in the finals of the Viridian City tournament, securing his record, setting 4th Kanto Junior Frontier victory. Curious about Chris's strategy for the battle royale, Anthony inquired if he would be utilizing his Charmeleon. However, Chris bristled at the suggestion, expressing the consequence if Charmeleon fell into the pool. He showcased his Hitmonchan, emphasizing his determination to emerge victorious and knock Anthony out of the competition. As the tension mounted backstage, the arena announcer's voice reverberated through the venue, introducing the esteemed judges. Don George, renowned for his expertise in Pokemon tournaments, Bill, a celebrated Pokemon researcher, and Lorelei, a formidable member of the Kanto Elite Four. With anticipation building, the trainers made their way to the arena, a large circular platform raised above a vast swimming pool. Water-type Pokemon diligently trained as lifeguards stood ready to assist any contestants in need after elimination. Paired with Battle Arena Pidgeots, the trainers ascended above the platform, positioned to oversee the action and issue commands to their Pokemon as they prepared for the exhilarating challenge ahead. Rachel observed Eevee's timid expression, her heart racing in sync with her Pokemon's nerves. Dratini, sensing Eevee's unease, nuzzled against her for comfort, a silent gesture of solidarity amidst the growing tension. With the referee's whistle piercing the air, the Battle Royale commenced, sending Pokemon into action with a flurry of moves and strategies. Amidst the chaos, 10 contestants were swiftly disqualified for inadvertently using an entirely different move. Eevee, utilizing Quick Attack with finesse, darted around the platform while Dratini unleashed Twister, eliminating 2 opponents in one powerful strike. Hitmonchan, with agility and precision, dispatched its adversaries with Mach Punch while glancing back at Dratini. 3 Raticate chased Eevee around the platform and it was backed into the edge. Suddenly, the Raticate were hit by a Water Gun, Thunderbolt, and Flamethrower, causing the 3 to fall into the pool. Eevee's face lit up with joy when meeting Vaporeon, Jolteon, and Flareon. The 4 tapped their paws off one another as if they were welcoming Eevee into their alliance. Meanwhile, Anthony and Rachel cheered fervently from above, their voices blending with the roar of the crowd below. With 15 contestants remaining, the trainers monitored their Pokemon's move PP, mindful of their limitations. Eevee used Quick Attack and bounced off a sleeping Snorlax. Dratini hit it with a Twister and it still didn't budge. Hitmonchan called for the attention of the Pokemon and they huddled together to discuss a strategy. 7 of the 14 were using special attack moves and they attacked Snorlax with a combination move. Snorlax awoke in a bad mood and stood up. The 7 Pokemon using physical moves charged at Snorlax and hit him for a combination strike. Hitmonchan gave it all into the Mach Punch. Snorlax tilted over the edge and fell into the pool, creating a huge wave that splashed into the audience where Mark, Brock, and Forrest sat. However, joy turned to devastation when Hitmonchan, fueled by malicious intent, struck Eevee with a Mach Punch, sending it tumbling into the pool below. Amidst the chaos, Rachel confronted Chris, her anger palpable as Pidgeot descended to retrieve Eevee from the water. Dratini was enraged and pursued Hitmonchan. The 2 collided and Dratini dodged Mach Punches. Dratini used Twister and Hitmonchan dived out of the way for a Tauros and a Primeape to get hit and were sent into the pool. The crowd was going wild as the Battle Royale was just down to Dratini and Hitmonchan. Hitmonchan was fast and kept avoiding Twisters. Both of their PP was reducing low. Mach Punch then landed and Dratini fell near to the edge. A smirking Hitmonchan stalked Dratini, getting its fists ready for the final strike. Dratini used its tail to trip Hitmonchan and it fell off the edge, though it managed to grab onto Dratini's tail. A struggling Dratini pressed its face into the ground, hoping to find strength to pull itself away. Chris was screaming from above. He yelled if Hitmonchan was going to fall, he better bring Dratini with it. Dratini belted out a loud roar, and its skin started to shed. Dratini slithered out of the cocoon that was its scaly skin, and Hitmonchan fell into the pool. Dratini was declared the winner of Pewter City Junior Frontier Battle Royale. Anthony was frozen from the shock, while Chris was yelling, accusing Dratini of cheating. The Pidgeot brought Anthony to the winning stage where he was presented a small golden trophy and boxes of what was a month's supply of Pokemon food and medical supplies. Anthony's Pokedex alerted and his jaw fell to see 15,000 Pokédollars was funded into his account. Anthony embraced the delighted Dratini as they received a standing ovation from the audience. Mark and Rachel ran on stage and dived on them with excitement. Pyro roared and confetti showered over them as Anthony never felt such pride than he did in this moment. Later that day, the trio found solace and celebration at Brock's house, where they were treated to a feast in honor of their victories. Amidst the festivities, Anthony selflessly transferred his prize money to his mother. As they bid farewell to Brock and his family, Rachel received invaluable recipes for their journey by Brock, while Anthony and Mark learned the proper application of medical supplies from Nurse Joy. Forrest approached Mark and shook his hand, thanking him for the great gym battle. Mark promised he would raise Rocco well. The trio said their goodbyes and made their way towards Mount Moon. There were many trainers that challenged them to battle along the way. All three won their battles, which gave their Pokemon a lot of experience, especially Eevee, who was preparing for the Cerulean City contest. They spotted a small Pokemon Center by the entrance of the mountain, so they took a small break before entering the cave. Rachel was practicing contest routines with Eevee outside, having it jump through hoops and dancing on its back paws. Suddenly, Eevee's ears twitched, and it pointed its tail over at the tall grass across from them. Rachel saw something pink and instantly thought it to be a Clefairy, but when she got closer, it was revealed to be a rare Igglybuff. Rachel cheered with excitement and without hesitation tossed a Pokeball. Igglybuff puffed up its body and flew up with the wind, missing the Pokeball by an inch. There was a red light beneath the grass and Rachel could hear wiggling. Suddenly, she got an alert from her Pokedex.
Oddish has been registered to your Pokédex.
Mark and Anthony ran out to Rachel, who was frozen with a pale face. They were overjoyed to see that she had caught a Pokemon.
It's a poison type? My first catch is a poison type.
Mark tried to cheer Rachel up, reminding her that Oddish evolved into Gloom, who then evolves through evolutionary stones. Mark added that with a Sunstone, that Oddish could one day become a Blossom, a pure grass type. This fact cheered Rachel up a bit. Blossom would be perfect for Pokemon contests. The Igglybuff floated down to the grass, laughing at a distressed Rachel, which infuriated her. With rage, she tossed another Pokeball. Igglybuff floated again, blowing with the wind. The ball landed in the grass, and yet again, there was a red light and a sound of wiggling.
Nidoran, female, has been registered to your Pokédex.
Rachel was horrified to learn that she had caught another poison-type Pokemon. Mark tried to cheer her up again by noting that Nidoran evolved into Nidorina, who then evolves with a Moonstone. However, Nidoqueen are still a poison type. Both Oddish and Nidoran popped out of their Pokeballs and started rubbing up against Rachel, delighted she was their trainer. This caused Rachel to shiver and cower behind Anthony, although Oddish and Nidoran thought she was playing a game of tag and started chasing her. The Nidoran paused and started pointing at the tall grass with whines. A male Nidoran popped its head out and the two nuzzled. Rachel did find it somewhat adorable. Anthony stepped forward and tossed a Pokeball.
Nidoran, male, has been registered to your Pokédex.
Anthony was ecstatic. He caught his fourth Pokemon. He tossed the ball and the male Nidoran jumped out and started playing with the female. Now you two can continue to play with each other every day, Anthony said to the happy Nidoran.
We have a total 6 poison types combined?
Well, it is Kanto after all. Anthony laughed. The Igglybuff was laughing at Rachel from the cave entrance, and she chased it inside with the others following. There were a lot of hiking trainers wanting to battle. Mark and Anthony accepted while a defiant Rachel pursued the chuckling Igglybuff. Her Nidoran zoomed with a great speed and surpassed Igglybuff, stopping it in its tracks. Rachel checked her Pokédex and called for Nidoran to use Fury Swipes. Igglybuff dodged and used Pound. Oddish dived in front of the Igglybuff and used Mega Drain. Igglybuff was sent reeling and then responded with Disarming Voice. It did little damage, but it gave the chance to run through a tunnel. Rachel chased after it with Eevee, Oddish, and Nidoran behind her. Rachel dived and grabbed hold of Igglybuff. However, the surface began to quake and they all fell through a hollow, falling down a slide of mud, and they ended up in a tomb-like area with walls covered in shiny crystals. Igglybuff slipped out of Rachel's hands and rolled through the tomb until it bumped into feet. Team Justice appeared out of the darkness. Levi was placing a glowing green crystal into a case, and he chuckled when spotting Rachel, remembering her from the Viridian forest. Madison picked up a struggling Igglybuff, mentioning that it would be a cute new addition to her team. The talking Drowsy that wore the same uniform as the humans stalked towards Rachel, who cowered back. Nidoran and Oddish stood guard of her, and Drowsy laughed, saying the weak poison types don't stand a chance against it. Eevee then growled and stood in line with Oddish and Nidoran. Oddish hit Drowsy with a quick Mega Drain, and Nidoran followed it up with Fury Swipes. Drowsy dropped to its knees and turned to Levi and Madison.
Can you not see I require reinforcements, you nitwits?
Levi sent out his Sandshrew and Madison sent out her Clefairy. Rachel stood up with great courage and ordered Nidoran to focus on Clefairy, Oddish on Sandshrew, and Eevee on Drowsy. However, Sandshrew dug underground, and to her surprise, Nidoran dug underground after him, so Oddish charged at Clefairy with Mega Drain. Clefairy stood up and hit Oddish with a super effective Fire Punch. Oddish collapsed by Rachel's feet, and to even her own surprise, Rachel picked up Oddish in her arms, staring at the wounded Pokemon with watery eyes. Drowsy used Psychic to levitate rocks from the ground, and they darted at Eevee. Rachel called it to use Quick Attack to avoid them, but its paw was still hit and Eevee fell and was injured. Nidoran and Sandshrew blasted out from beneath the ground. Sandshrew hit Nidoran with Mudshot and Nidoran collapsed. A crying Rachel grabbed all 3 of her Pokemon, holding them tight as Drowsy, Sandshrew, and Clefairy stalked them. Igglybuff bit down on Madison's finger and was released. It dived in front of Rachel just as her enemies were conjuring attacks. Igglybuff used Protect, preventing the attacks from getting near Rachel and her Pokemon. Igglybuff used Disarming Voice, but it did minor damage and the 3 evil Pokemon pushed through. Drowsy conjured a Psybeam, and it blasted forward. Suddenly, the Psybeam was struck down by a blue fire, shocking Team Justice. Charlie emerged out of the darkness with Mark and Anthony. Mark tossed 5 Pokeballs for the rest of his team to join Charlie, and Anthony brought out his 4 Pokemon. His male Nidoran was both concerned about the female and angered with Team Justice. Team Justice's Pokemon were hit by a combination of attacks, so they quickly returned them. Madison grabbed Drowsy and Levi held his case tight, and their jetpacks rocketed him up into a hollow in the ceiling. Anthony used his medical supplies to heal Rachel's Pokemon. The 2 Nidoran were overjoyed to be reunited. Rachel thanked the boys for rescuing her, and she turned to Igglybuff to thank it for saving her too. Igglybuff curled up in Rachel's arms and was affectionate towards her. Igglybuff wanted to join her party. Rachel took out a special Pokeball, a Moon Ball, and tipped it off Igglybuff, and it was sucked inside.
Igglybuff has been registered to your Pokédex.
Rachel beamed with joy at her latest catch. Turning to Oddish and Nidoran, she offered a heartfelt apology for any past insensitivity due to their poison type. She expressed deep gratitude for their bravery and confided how proud she was to be their trainer. They were the Pokemon who had opened her eyes to the kindness, affection, and charm inherent in poison types. While her fear might linger, Oddish and Nidoran had reshaped her perception, allowing her to view poison types through a positive lens. As the group journeyed through Mount Moon towards Cerulean City, anticipation for Rachel's first Pokemon contest, Anthony's next Junior Frontier Challenge, and Mark's second gym battle filled the air. Yet, amidst the excitement, Mark couldn't shake a nagging sense of unease. Conversations with Rachel only stoked his curiosity, driving him to unravel the enigma shrouding Team Justice and their hidden motives. As the group reached Cerulean City, their excitement was palpable after finally leaving the depths of Mount Moon. Throughout their travels, Mark's Pokemon had proven their strength, emerging victorious in every battle. His Pidgey Nimbus proudly perched on his shoulder, a testament to its mastery of Steel Wing, which had helped overcome numerous Rock-type opponents. Upon arrival in Cerulean City, they headed straight for the Pokemon Center to wash off the mud from Mount Moon, relax, and enjoy a filling lunch. With the Pokemon contest for Rachel scheduled for the following day, she took the initiative to prepare her team, which included Eevee, Oddish, Nidoran, and Igglybuff for the competition. As Rachel focused on her contest preparations, Anthony learned that the Cerulean Junior Frontier would take place in the same arena as the Pokemon contest, but not for another 3 days. Initially considering a day of relaxation, Rachel wisely encouraged him to use the time for training and tournament research. Meanwhile, Mark's plans to head to the gym took a detour when he overheard a group of enthusiastic children discussing an upcoming underwater ballet show at the Cerulean City Gym, featuring none other than the Kanto region's champion, Misty. Disappointed by the delay in his gym battle, Mark suggested attending the ballet show in hopes of meeting champion Misty. Rachel, recognizing the opportunity to enhance her stage presence by watching the performance, eagerly agreed. However, Anthony held little interest in a ballet show and preferred a day of leisure, perhaps spending it fishing in pursuit of a water-type Pokemon. Ultimately, Anthony agreed to Mark's suggestion of attending the ballet show after they spend the morning fishing and enjoying a subsequent period of relaxation. To increase their chance of success, the group leased fishing rods, lure balls, net balls, and dive balls, in addition to purchasing tickets to Misty's presentation from the Pokemart. During their shopping trip, the group encountered an unexpected turn of events when a group of mischievous Meowth barged through the store, carrying items taken from the food hall and being chased by irate store employees. Rachel couldn't help but notice Anthony scowling, grunting harsh words under his breath towards the Meowth as if he detested their very sight. The trio then continued onto Route 25, a short distance from the city, where they discovered a vast field with a lake in the center. In the wide open area, their Pokémon played joyfully. Rocco's enthusiasm knocked Mark over once again, a daily occurrence that elicited light-hearted laughter from Anthony and Rachel. Anthony eagerly positioned himself by the water's edge, poised for a chance to reel in a water-type Pokémon. As if on cue, Rachel's rod caught something, and she started to reel it in. Rachel yelled as a Staryu exploded from the lake's surface. She threw a lure ball to catch it, but the Staryu was resilient and escaped the ball. Rachel was forcefully drenched by a water gun, and her irritation was clear. She summoned Oddish, who responded with a powerful Mega Drain, which struck Staryu. However, the Staryu countered with Rapid Spin, colliding with Oddish and knocking it back. Unfazed, Rachel encouraged Oddish, and its spirit remained unbroken. Oddish used Growth to increase its power and dodged many water gun attacks before releasing another Mega Drain that connected. This time, Rachel aimed a netball towards Staryu.
Staryu has been registered to your Pokédex.
Mark gave Rachel a thumbs up, saying it was great that she caught a Staryu right before they went to Misty's show, especially since she used to raise one when she was younger. An hour went by and Mark and Anthony still hadn't caught any water Pokémon. Rachel used the time to train her 5 Pokémon. Mark was half dozing while Anthony remained focused staring at the lake. Finally, his fishing line twitched, and he yanked it out of the water with all his might. A Magikarp flopped at his feet. Mark and Rachel looked a bit bummed, but then they saw a huge smile on Anthony's face. He tossed a dive ball, and before they knew it, he'd caught the Magikarp.
Magikarp has been registered to your Pokédex.
Anthony hopped around the field like he'd caught Mew, revealing his love for Gyarados, one of his favorite Pokémon. His excitement was infectious, fueled by his plans to train the newly caught Magikarp. Seeing Anthony's elation, Mark connected the dots to Misty, recalling how her Gyarados was famous worldwide. This got him pumped up, speculating about what other water types linked to Misty might appear next. Could it be a Seaking, a Dugong, maybe a Golduck, or even a Blastoise? After another half hour with no action on the fishing front, Anthony dozed off with his Pokémon while Rachel continued honing her skills with hers. Meanwhile, Mark's patience was wearing thin. He was on the brink of throwing in the towel when his rod gave a sharp tug. Out of the lake emerged a Cloyster, sporting a mischievous grin, yanking Mark underwater. Clinging on for dear life, Mark was pulled through the water by the determined Cloyster, his breath running thin. Releasing his grip on the rod, he struggled to swim upwards, but the depth was against him. Oxygen dwindled, his face turned an alarming shade of blue, and his vision began to blur. Out of nowhere, a hook caught onto his jacket, propelling him out of the water. Collapsing onto the grass, he coughed up water, his gaze meeting the astonished eyes of a woman standing above him. His shock doubled when he realized it was none other than the champion Misty who had come to his rescue.
Oh, it's just a kid,
she said, realizing it wasn't a water type. Misty then helped Mark to his feet, and he looked at her in awe. Finally finding the courage, he introduced himself and revealed that he is a big fan of hers. He showed Misty his Boulder badge and said he plans on winning at the Indigo Plateau. Misty smiled and said he reminded her of an old friend. When Mark mentioned Ash's name, Misty looked sad. She revealed she had taken a break from her champion duties to help find Ash, but the police had been pressuring her to stay out of it. Mark then mentioned Team Justice, suggesting they could be working for Giovani. Misty assured Mark that she would look into them. However, the clock reminded her of her impending preparations for her show, a duty she felt reluctant to fill. Despite her reservations, her sisters had a knack of persuading her otherwise. Mark chimed in, promising to be a part of the cheering crowd. With a warm smile, Misty produced spare backstage passes and extended them to Mark, adding that they held the chance to meet Rain, the gym leader of Cerulean City and Misty's younger cousin. Misty said a rushed goodbye, and Mark found his worried friends and Pokémon, informing them of what just happened. They were jealous he got to meet Misty, but excited to learn he got them backstage passes. Rachel suggested they head to the Cerulean City gym where the show took place, as the doors would be opening soon for the pre-show. Completely soaked, Mark chuckled and announced his plan to make a quick dash to the Pokémon Center to get changed into dry clothes, assuring everyone that he would catch up with them there. With a wave, they bid temporary farewells and went their separate ways. Mark hurried back to the Pokémon Center and swiftly changed into fresh, dry clothes before setting off toward the gym. As he made his way up through the lively streets, the excitement for Misty's underwater ballet show was palpable. gray clouds suddenly consumed the skies of Cerulean City, with thunder rumbling in the distance. Marc was just thankful it didn't rain and he avoided another soaking. Marc was then distracted by the same group of Meowth he had seen fleeing the Pokemart. Again, they ran with food and drink items. A strange feeling came over Marc and he decided to follow them. He ended up at the Nugget Bridge, north of Cerulean City, following them through the Golden Bridge to a small field of flower beds and shrubs beside the river. The Meowth dived into the bushes and Marc approached. Suddenly, he was struck by gold coins that hit him like bullets, sending him back. The Meowth pounced out with their claws, ready to strike. Marc tried reasoning with them, saying he just wanted to know why they kept stealing from the Pokemart. The Meowth made sounds, trying to explain themselves, but Marc couldn't understand. An idea clicked in his head, and he brought out Gasper, asking it to translate. Gasper said the Meowth recently rescued a Pokemon from a gang of poachers, and this Pokemon had become a member of their group, which rescues any Pokemon from hunters and poachers. The poachers have a secret base disguised as a car dealership nearby. The Meowth have tried to inform Officer Jenny, but they have a bad reputation for stealing food, which they only do for the sick Pokemon they rescue. Recently, the Meowth and their new friend went on a mission to rescue more Pokemon from the secret base, but everything went wrong, and their friend got hit by poison and is now very sick. The Meowth pushed back the bush, revealing a fragile Pichu sleeping with an ice bag over its head. Marc sprayed an antidote on Pichu, which helped a little, but the poison had been in its system for too long, requiring advanced medical treatment. Marc asked why they didn't bring Pichu to the Pokemon Center, as Nurse Joy wouldn't deny treating any Pokemon, but the Meowth were too scared because the poachers were always undercover and scout Pokemon Centers for any Pokemon that might have escaped their base. Marc offered to take Pichu to Nurse Joy, promising he wouldn't leave its side and would also inform Officer Jenny about what's happening after Pichu was healed. Suddenly, a truck sped through the field. 5 sinister-looking men jumped out, cheering that they had finally found them. They were the poachers, and Marc warned them that he would call the police. Marc turned to the Meowth and told them to guard Pichu. The 5 men tossed 6 Pokeballs each, releasing 29 Zubat and 1 Golbat, which was owned by the leader of the poachers. Marc brought out the rest of his Pokemon, but he was outnumbered, his 6 against their 30. The Meowth leader sent out the others to join Marc's Pokemon while it stayed behind to guard Pichu. Marc could tell this Meowth really cared for Pichu. The 2 armies of Pokemon collided. Ember, Razor Leaf, Poison Sting, and Rock Throw attacks came from all angles. The lead poacher held a strange gun-like weapon that fired nets, capturing most of the fighting Meowth. Fueled by anger, Marc lunged forward, charging at the leader and leaping onto him. However, the man swiftly shrugged him off and landed a hard punch to Marc's eye, sending him stumbling backwards. This unexpected attack diverted the attention of Marc's concerned Pokemon. Sadly, all of them except Nimbus fell victim to a flurry of Poison Sting and wing attacks, causing them to collapse in pain. Nimbus took to the gray sky, soaring with remarkable speed. The leader's Golbat growled at the other Zubat and then set off in pursuit of Nimbus. Meanwhile, the group of 29 Zubat positioned themselves above Marc, readying for an assault. With sheer determination, Marc managed to haul himself to his feet, shaking off the pain. The thunder roared above him. The lightning flashed in the grim skies.
Zubat! Listen to me! I know I'm not the strongest or the bravest. I've spent my whole life feeling scared and weak, always falling behind and never fitting in. I've seen pain and loss. I've watched my mother cry every night because my father was fighting in the Pokemon War. I felt the emptiness when my grandfather's Meganium passed away. I've been bullied and left alone, afraid of the very creatures I wanted to befriend. But no more. I used to hate myself for being different, for being afraid. I thought I was a coward, but not today. Today, I stand before you, not as a timid boy, but as someone who wants to protect the innocent. This Pichu is under my protection. I won't let you harm her. I won't let anyone harm any Pokemon. Yes, I hate the hunters who capture and harm Pokemon for their own gain, and I will not stop until they are brought to justice. But more than that, I want to be a friend to all Pokemon. I want to show that there is kindness in this world, that there is someone who cares. I will protect those who cannot protect themselves. I will be their shield and their friend, because I am Marc Masters, and I refuse to be afraid anymore. So come on, give me your best shot.
The sick Pichu sat up, looking at Marc with concern, with Meowth by its side who looked equally worried. overpowered combined Thunderbolt attacks overwhelmed the 29 Zubat, causing them to collapse to the ground. Pichu fell back into unconsciousness, and Marc quickly pulled it up into his arms. The battle wasn't over, as Golbat was still battling Nimbus in the sky. Golbat spat Poison Sting, but Nimbus deflected it using Steel Wing as a shield. Nimbus let out a loud cough, and its body began to glow. Nimbus had transformed and evolved into a Pidgeotto. The Golbat flinched with worry, and Nimbus soared like a flash using agility. It then conjured a powerful twister and blasted Golbat, knocking it down to the ground. Marc praised Nimbus as it soared down to him. It glanced at the leader Meowth, and it jumped on its back, and the two flew back up into the sky. Nimbus conjured another twister, and Meowth released a Thunderbolt for the two moves to merge into a tornado of lightning bolts. It spun towards the poachers, and they were struck down. Sirens echoed through the fields as the dark clouds faded from the now blue skies, the sun making its return. The police arrived at the scene. Marc explained everything. The poachers had been arrested and their secret base was discovered, and all of the captured Pokémon were set free and treated back to health before returning to the wild. Officer Jenny brought Marc back to the Pokémon Center where his Pokémon were treated. She promised the group of Meowth wouldn't be punished for their theft. In fact, for their bravery and heroic actions, they would be rewarded and offered to work for the Pokémon Ranger Squad that helps bring down poachers. Marc was overjoyed with the news. While he waited for his Pokémon to be healed, the leader Meowth sat next to him while Pichu was being treated. "You're really worried about Pichu? Don't worry, it will be fine." Marc put his arm around Meowth, and within a few moments, Meowth fell asleep on his lap. Anthony and Rachel returned to the Pokémon Center, yelling at Marc for missing Misty's show. They paused when they noticed the sleeping Meowth, and Anthony's expression turned hostile, though it went unnoticed. Marc told them everything. Rachel and Anthony were shocked to learn what Marc had gone through, but were very proud of him. Rachel was angered that there were poachers hiding in plain sight, but relieved these had been caught. Chansey came out with Marc's 6 Pokémon, glowing with help. They all jumped on Marc to embrace him, unintentionally knocking Meowth down. Anthony noticed and praised Nimbus for evolving. Nurse Joy came out and revealed that Pichu was responding well to the treatment and should be fully recovered by tomorrow. She asked Marc if he would like to come visit Pichu, and he explained that he wasn't its trainer. Meowth tugged on Marc's hand, dragging him down the hallway to Pichu's ward. Meowth jumped on the bed, giving Pichu a caring hug. Tears flowed down their faces, which made Marc tear up. Pichu then took Marc's hand and nuzzled him.
You did a good thing today.
Misty appeared behind Marc.
You remind me so much of him.
Marc and his Pokémon didn't leave Pichu's side that night. Marc slept on the floor while the Pokémon shared the bed and sofa. The next morning, Pichu was beaming, waking everybody up with a light thunder shock. Nurse Joy arrived and announced that Pichu was healthy enough to leave and that there was a surprise waiting outside for it and Meowth. Outside the Pokémon Center, many citizens cheered, honoring Pichu, Meowth, Marc, and his Pokémon for bringing down the secret poacher organization in Cerulean City. Each of them received a ribbon for their heroic actions, and the Meowth group, along with Pichu, were offered to join the Pokémon Ranger Squad. However, Pichu looked conflicted. It ran over to Marc and climbed up to his shoulder. Gasper informed them that Pichu wanted to join Marc on his journey. Marc said he would be honored to be Pichu's trainer, but there was a catch. He explained that it wouldn't be right to break up best friends, so he turned to the Meowth leader and asked if it would be willing to give up being a Pokémon Ranger and become his team member with Pichu. Meowth's face beamed with joy and its eyes watered. It turned to the other Meowth and made cat-like noises. Gasper translated, saying Meowth was giving them a pep talk, assuring them that they didn't need a leader and they were all ready to become great Pokémon Rangers. Meowth and Pichu said farewell to the other Meowth and turned to Marc, smiling up at him. He tossed 2 unique Pokeballs, a luxury ball aimed at Meowth and a love ball aimed at Pichu. They were simultaneously consumed into their respective balls, wiggling for a few seconds before their captures were confirmed.
Pichu and Meowth has been registered to your Pokédex.
Marc picked up the 2 Pokeballs that had red lights glowing in the center. Rachel reminded him that only 6 Pokemon can be on his active team. The others are sent to his designated carer, who would be his father, Marc Masters. Marc then decided to call his parents to catch up and check in on Pichu and Meowth, who might be confused about where they are. Mike praised Marc for everything he had been accomplishing, but his mother Mia yelled at him for putting himself in danger. Marc asked about his brothers, Maven and Malcolm. Mike informed him that they'd call every so often and were quite vague about their journey. He added they'd yet to catch more than 6 Pokemon, which made Marc feel accomplished. Mike suggested he transfer his Butterfree and Pidgeotto so they could spread their wings and fly around his landscape. Marc transferred Wilfred and Nimbus in exchange for Pichu and Meowth, mentioning he would be rotating his Pokemon frequently to ensure they all get trained well. The transfer was made, and Marc brought out Meowth and Pichu, telling them of his dreams and goals to defeat all gym leaders and then the Pokemon League. Marc then asked Pichu if he could name her Ray, and Meowth Darius, to which both accepted with fondness. Anthony had a cold expression on his face as he stared at Darius, but his trance was interrupted by an excited Marc, who approached Rachel. "You're up first, Rach! The Cerulean City contest ribbon is yours!"
Strongest Pokemon. And we succeeded.
It had been utter devastation. In a location unknown to most of the world, smoke hung heavy in the air, while the ground was a tapestry of craters and debris. It was a place of war, far from civilization, intended to keep the innocent away from the crossfire. Powerful trainers had bravely joined the war, fighting against the United Organizations, also known as the Dark Alliance. Fallen Pokemon and trainers lay scattered across the battlefield, but the war was far from over. Stephen Stone, the former champion of Hoenn, rose from the smoke, struggling to maintain his courage. He glanced down at his hand that held a photo of himself, holding his little girl. His face then set with determination as he navigated the battlefield, his shiny Mega Metagross steadfastly by his side. Stephen's sharp eyes spotted Brock, frantically tending to injured Pokemon within a medical tent. Pokemon of all kinds lay on stretchers while Brock, his face etched with worry and exhaustion, worked tirelessly to save them. Nearby, a fierce battle raged between Marc Masters and Ariana, Giovani's formidable wife. The two trainers' Pokemon clashed with explosive force. Amidst the fray, Stephen's attention was locked on Ariana, who clutched a blueprint with a grip of desperation. She fought fiercely, yet her eyes betrayed a desire to flee.
Metagross, use Psychic!
Stephen commanded, his voice cutting through the din. The air around Metagross shimmered with energy as it focused its psychic power. In a swift, decisive move, the blueprint was torn from Ariana's grasp and levitated towards Stephen. He caught it, his eyes widening in shock as he read the contents.
We need to find Ash!
Stephen muttered. Metagross nodded in understanding, and together they ascended, soaring above the battlefield. Suddenly a powerful attack struck them mid-air. Stephen and Metagross plummeted to the ground, landing with a bone-jarring impact. Through the haze of pain, Stephen saw Giovani standing before them, flanked by his 6 formidable Pokémon.
Your interference ends here, Stephen.
Giovani sneered, his eyes cold and calculating. The ensuing battle was fierce and unrelenting. Metagross fought with relentless precision, each move executed with deadly accuracy. Giovanni's Pokémon were unyielding, their combined strength a formidable force. A devastating hit brought Mega Metagross to unconsciousness. Losing its Mega Evolution power, Stephen rushed to his partner's side, shielding it with his body as Giovani approached, his expression triumphant.
Metagross, no!
Stephen cried, his voice breaking with emotion. He stood resolute, ready to defend his Pokémon with his life. Giovani smirked, raising his hand for the final blow. In a last, desperate act of defiance, Stephen lunged forward, taking the hit meant for Metagross. Pain seared through him, but he remained unyielding.
Metagross, if you can hear me, please, watch over Daisy and Rachel.
Stephen whispered, but Metagross was still unresponsive. Stephen's vision blurred, and he glanced to the photo of him holding his daughter.
I love you, Princess.
As Stephen's body collapsed, the photo fell from his grasp. Giovani stepped over him, retrieving the blueprint with a victorious glint in his eyes.
I know what I must do.
It was the big day for Rachel Stone. She was competing in her first official Pokémon contest. She was super nervous, but her 5 Pokémon gave her great comfort. She had the shock of her life when her family arrived at Cerulean City. Her mother Daisy, Uncle Gary, and great-grandfather Samuel Oakes surprised her at the Pokémon Center. They were very much proud of the Pokémon she caught, especially her 2 poison types. Overjoyed, she finally got over her fear of them. Daisy handed Rachel a box that contained a beautiful dress for her to wear and ball capsules to place over her Pokeballs. She informed them that she would be using Eevee for the first round, which was the showcase part of the contest. Mark was shocked when he saw Delia Ketchum enter the Pokémon Center. She looked worse for wear. The bags under her eyes had gone dark. Misty was with her holding her hand and giving her some words of encouragement. She rearranged her expression and smiled at Rachel, wishing her luck in the contest. The group made their way to the Battle Club Arena where the contest would be taking place. Misty's name was called as they crossed the road, and it was a teenage boy approaching her. Misty introduced him to the group as Rain, her 15-year-old cousin. Mark was shocked a boy his age was a gym leader, but Misty explained that she had been training Rain for years before he got his Pokémon license. His skills in battle were unmatched against all the trainers who took part in a tournament to decide the new gym leader after her sisters retired from Pokémon battling. So, this is the boy you were talking about, huh? Rain asked, staring at Mark. I look forward to beating you later. Rain strolled through the street and Mark's fist curled. Rachel was escorted to the backstage area while her friends and family took a seat in the audience. Mark sat beside Misty and quietly asked if she investigated Team Justice. Careful Delia didn't overhear. Misty said she spoke to a man called Looker of the International Police. They were aware of Team Justice and said they were only coming out from the shadows. It was still too early to know what their intentions are, and if they're connected to the disbanded United organizations. Mark reminded Misty that Team Justice told him they were not agents of Giovani, and they hated both the good and evil sides, as they both created a war.
So they claim they're not good or evil. Well, that sounds like someone who's unpredictable and has nothing to lose. But why are they only showing their faces now that Ash has disappeared? I don't know if they were responsible for his disappearance, but I will say this. They certainly have something menacing in the works.
The contest ceremony opened with Vivian Meridian introducing the panel of judges, the local Nurse Joy of Cerulean City, Mr. Tsukizo of the Pokémon Fan Club, and Elite Coordinator Drew. Suddenly, the spotlight shined on Misty, and Vivian announced to the crowd that the champion had attended. Misty blushed and didn't look too pleased with Vivian for revealing her presence. Rachel was backstage combing Evie's fur. She paused when feeling someone was watching her, and she wasn't wrong. A teenage girl approached her and Rachel's jaw fell. The girl was called Emma, Rachel's childhood friend and classmate, but they weren't so friendly with one another. Emma had always been jealous of Rachel's famous family names, both Oak and Stone. The two always tried to one-up each other in school. Emma's name was called, and she told Rachel that the Cerulean ribbon would be going home with her before entering the stage. Emma tossed her sparkly Pokeball that burst into colorful flames. Ponyta sped across the stage with Flame Wheel and launched itself into the air like a miniature sun. Flamethrower shot out, and Ponyta used Wild Charge that overlaid the flames, and the stage was showered with fireworks. The judges praised Ponyta, giving it a high score. Emma bowed to the cheering audience before departing the stage. A nervous Rachel was up next. She approached the stage, and her friends and family cheered loudly. The audience was intrigued when Vivian announced her as an Oak and a Stone. The expectations for Rachel had become high. She tossed her Pokeball and it blasted open with stars. Eevee came out spinning while using Sand Attack, which conjured an amazing tornado of sand. Eevee then used a track, and floating love hearts entered the tornado, turning it to a bright pink color. Eevee then used Swift, which surprised Mark and Anthony as it was a newly learned move. The floating star hovered around the pink sand tornado, and the audience was in awe. The judges applauded and granted Eevee a high score that secured Rachel to the next round. The screen presented the final four that would take part in the battle round. It was Rachel, Emma, a boy called Chad, and a girl called Alice. Rachel was up against Chad, who seemed like a flashy boy who loved his looks. Emma took on Alice, showing she was skilled in battle. Emma's Lickitung made quick work of Alice's Parasect. Rachel and Chad were called to the stage. Rachel sent out her newly caught Staryu and Chad sent out his Poliwhirl. It was a battle of the water types, which made Misty smile. The two blasted powerful water gun attacks that were evenly matched. Staryu then hit Poliwhirl with a rapid spin, and Poliwhirl responded with a double slap. Poliwhirl then smashed Staryu with Body Slam, causing it to be paralyzed. Rachel was frustrated. She called Staryu to use Rapid Spin, but it was too slow and was hit by another double slap, sending Staryu reeling. Poliwhirl charged forward, with its fist flashing with electricity. Rachel yelled at Staryu to use Water Gun upward, and it sprayed water all over itself. This helped shake off some of the paralysis, and Staryu launched over Poliwhirl and struck it with a Psybeam for the KO. Rachel had made it to the final round. After a short break, Rachel returned to the stage to come face to face with her rival, Emma. Rachel tossed her Pokeball and brought out Oddish, and Emma started laughing, but not in the way everyone thought. She tossed her Pokeball, and she sent out an Oddish too. Emma's Oddish used Stun Spore, and Rachel told hers to dodge and then use Mega Drain. It did little damage, and Emma's Oddish used Growth. The two then sprayed Stun Spore, and the two were left paralyzed. Both Rachel and Emma were extremely frustrated, begging their Oddish to move. Suddenly, the two Oddish started to glow, their bodies transforming. The crowd was shocked to see both Oddish had evolved into Gloom simultaneously, and they were no longer paralyzed. Both Glooms struck each other with Mega Drain, and again, it did little damage. Emma then called for Solar Beam, so Rachel called for Solar Beam too. The arena was blinded with yellow lights, and there was an explosion. Both Gloom were fragile, but still standing. A whistle screeched, calling for a halt. The referee ended the match as the 5-minute time limit was up. Rachel and Emma's points showed up on the screen, and they were the exact same. The judges took a moment to discuss what to do regarding the winner. Drew stepped forward and announced for the first time in Cerulean City contest history, there would be 2 winners. Rachel and Emma were so evenly matched throughout the entire contest that the judges couldn't decide one winner. So, both coordinators were rewarded with Cerulean ribbons. Emma was angered that she wasn't the sole winner and took her ribbon and left in a huff. Rachel was overjoyed and she ran to Gloom to give it a big hug. Evie, Staryu, and Gloom were each gifted ribbons for their victory, and Rachel looked up to the sky and spoke.
This was for you, Dad.
This is the next generation's roar.